In this video, we're going to break down which Family Guy character is the craziest, ranking their moments from least to most insane. Let's get started. First up, we got Chris Griffin, least crazy, understanding crazy in Family Guy's universe. Before diving into the rankings, it's important to define what makes a character crazy in the context of Family Guy. We're looking at characters who display genuinely unhinged behavior, whether through violence, obsession, criminal acts, complete detachment from reality, or world domination schemes. Simple stupidity doesn't count as crazy, which is why we need to distinguish between characters who are merely dumb versus those who are genuinely psychotic. Chris Griffin, the lovably dim-witted Griffin. When examining the Griffin family's middle child, Chris Griffin stands out not for being crazy, but for being spectacularly, almost impossibly stupid. Voiced by Seth Green since the show's debut in 1999, Chris represents teenage awkwardness taken to an extreme level. While his behavior might appear bizarre on the surface, a closer look reveals that his actions stem from profound stupidity rather than genuine insanity. The nature of Chris's stupidity. Chris Griffin's intelligence level has been a running joke throughout Family Guy's long run. Unlike his genius baby brother Stewie, or even his struggling but functional sister Meg, Chris operates on a wavelength that defies normal human comprehension. The show has established that Chris doesn't suffer from any diagnosed mental illness. He's simply extraordinarily unintelligent, possibly having inherited this trait from his father Peter. What makes Chris different from being crazy is that his actions always come from a place of misunderstanding rather than malice or genuine psychological dysfunction. He's not trying to cause chaos or harm. He simply cannot process information the way a normal person would. This distinction is crucial when separating characters who are merely stupid from those who are genuinely unhinged. Evidence from When You Wish Upon a Weinstein. The episode When You Wish Upon a Weinstein provides one of the most memorable examples of Chris's gullibility and lack of basic reasoning skills. In a scene that has become iconic among fans, Peter demonstrates just how easy it is to manipulate his son's perception of reality. Peter smacks Chris in the back of the head, then immediately tells him that the lamp did it. Any person with even basic critical thinking skills would recognize this as obviously false. Lamps are inanimate objects that cannot move or strike people. But Chris? He doesn't question it for even a second. Instead, he immediately tackles the lamp and begins wrestling with it on the floor, fully convinced that this household object has committed an act of aggression against him. This scene perfectly encapsulates Chris's relationship with reality. He lacks the fundamental ability to distinguish between what's possible and what's impossible. An inanimate object attacking him should be immediately dismissed as absurd, but Chris's brain doesn't possess that filter. He takes information at face value without any analysis or critical thought. The episode also features Peter explaining that it's too late for him and that Meg's a girl, but Chris has potential, which is why Peter wants to make Chris Jewish, believing it will make him smarter. This premise itself acknowledges that Chris desperately needs help in the intelligence department. Peter's concern about Chris's future isn't unfounded paranoia. It's based on the very real observation that his son struggles with basic cognitive functions. When Lois calls Peter out for acting like a child, Peter delivers one of his classic retorts. "You better watch who you're calling a child, Lois. Because if I'm a child, then do you know what that makes you? A pedophile. And I'll be damned if I'm gonna stand here and be lectured by a pervert." This exchange, while focused on Peter, reminds us that Chris has inherited his father's twisted logic and inability to process information correctly. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Evidence from Stewie, Chris, and Brian's Excellent Adventure. The episode Stewie, Chris, and Brian's Excellent Adventure takes Chris's stupidity to historical levels, quite literally. When Stewie and Brian decide to help Chris study for his history test by using a time machine, they quickly discover that Chris's lack of knowledge goes far beyond simply not studying. He fundamentally doesn't understand history, reality, or even basic facts that most people learn in elementary school. One of the most telling moments comes when Stewie quizzes Chris on famous historical quotes. When asked who said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself," Chris confidently answers, "Scooby-Doo." This isn't just getting an answer wrong on a test. This is revealing a complete disconnect from reality. The quote, famously attributed to Franklin D. Roosevelt, is one of the most recognized statements in American history, but Chris somehow believes it came from a cartoon dog who solves mysteries. This moment shows that Chris doesn't just lack education, he lacks any framework for understanding the world. He cannot distinguish between real historical figures and fictional cartoon characters. His brain has placed FDR and Scooby-Doo on the same level of legitimacy, which suggests a cognitive problem far deeper than simply not paying attention in class. The time travel adventure provides even more examples of Chris's dysfunction. When they witness the Titanic sinking firsthand, Chris says, "This would make a great movie." This statement reveals several layers of stupidity. First, Chris doesn't seem to understand that they're watching a real historical tragedy unfold. Second, he doesn't know that the Titanic disaster is already one of the most famous events in history, with multiple films made about it. Third, his casual response to watching hundreds of people die shows a complete lack of appropriate emotional response. When Stewie mentions they're visiting Jane Austen's home in 1798, Chris responds, "Jane Austen? I don't think she's on my history test, Stewie." Stewie then explains they're just there to release pent-up time travel farts. And Chris's response is simply, "Awesome." This exchange shows Chris's priorities and understanding are completely backwards. He can't comprehend why visiting one of English literature's most important authors would be valuable, but he's immediately excited about the prospect of farting. There's a particularly dark moment when Stewie tells Chris he's dreaming because Stewie doesn't want Chris to know about the time machine. Stewie's reasoning is brilliant. It's like having a pickup truck. Once people know you got one, there go your weekends. But Chris, believing he's in a dream where there are no consequences, does something horrifying. He cuts off his own hand. This isn't just stupid, it's dangerously stupid. Even if someone believed they were dreaming, the instinct for self-preservation should prevent them from self-harm. But Chris lacks even that basic survival instinct. The episode also shows Chris enthusiastically declaring, "I want to kill more scientists," after watching Brian bludgeon Ivan Pavlov to death with one of his own bells. While this is played for dark comedy, it reveals that Chris has no moral compass or understanding of consequences. He sees violence as entertainment rather than something serious. At one point, Chris refers to Brian and Stewie as booger breath and the mushroom tip, showing that even when Chris tries to be insulting, his insults are childish and nonsensical. When Stewie asks which one of us is which, it highlights how Chris's attempts at cleverness always fall flat because he simply doesn't have the mental capacity to be effectively mean or witty. Evidence from Boopa Dee Bappa Dee. The episode Boopa Dee Bappa Dee provides perhaps the most damning evidence of Chris's stupidity through one simple scene that has become legendary among fans. When the Griffin family is in Italy and Chris needs to look up the word success, both he and Peter demonstrate their shared intellectual deficit in spectacular fashion. Chris, unfamiliar with the concept of success, decides to look it up. The natural thing to do would be to grab a phone, tablet, or computer. Instead, Chris runs to the kitchen and attempts to use the toaster as if it were a computer. He and Peter both genuinely believe that the toaster is the computer and can provide information. This isn't a momentary lapse in judgment. They both fully commit to this belief. Think about what this reveals. The toaster is a small kitchen appliance with slots for bread and a lever. It has no screen, no keyboard, no buttons, beyond the basic toaster functions. There is absolutely nothing about a toaster that resembles a computer in any way. Yet both Chris and Peter look at this appliance and see a device capable of searching for word definitions. This goes beyond simple stupidity into territory that suggests they might need serious cognitive evaluation. The scene becomes even funnier and sadder when you consider the implications. What do they think happens when they use the toaster as a computer? Do they think the toasted bread will have information printed on it? Do they think the toaster will speak to them? The logistics of their belief system don't make any sense, which perfectly captures Chris's relationship with reality, Dia's self. It's not based on logic, observation, or experience. It's based on complete misunderstanding. This episode also features Stewie attempting to strangle Chris while saying in an Italian accented whisper, "You break my heart, Chris," "You break my heart." Chris's response to being strangled? He just struggles and chokes, but there's no indication he understands why this is happening or that it's part of a weird joke. He's simply reacting physically, without any higher level processing of the bizarre situation. When the family is told they must sing the national anthem to prove they're American, it's a moment that could have showcased whether Chris actually knows basic patriotic information. Given his track record with historical knowledge, one can assume he probably struggles with this too, though the episode doesn't explicitly show his performance. The pattern of Chris's behavior. Looking across these 3 episodes and beyond, a clear pattern emerges. Chris Griffin consistently believes obvious lies immediately. Whether it's a lamp attacking him or any other absurd claim, Chris accepts information without any skepticism or critical analysis. Cannot distinguish fiction from reality. He thinks Scooby-Doo is a real historical figure. He doesn't recognize actual historical events. His brain treats cartoons and reality as equally valid, lacks basic knowledge that children learn early. He doesn't know what the Titanic is, can't identify famous quotes, and doesn't understand fundamental concepts, fails to grasp technology. He thinks a toaster is a computer, showing he cannot identify even the most basic functions of common household items, has no sense of consequences. He cuts off his own hand believing he's dreaming, showing dangerous impulsivity and lack of self-preservation, processes insults and social situations incorrectly. His attempts at comebacks are childish, and he misses obvious social cues, inherits his father's worst traits. Like Peter, Chris rushes to conclusions, believes absurd things, and acts without thinking. Why Chris isn't actually crazy. Despite all this evidence of profound stupidity, Chris doesn't qualify as crazy in the traditional sense. Here's why. He's not malicious. Chris doesn't try to hurt people, except in the dream scenario where he thought there were no consequences. His stupidity causes problems, but he's not deliberately destructive. He's not delusional. Chris doesn't create elaborate false realities in his mind. He simply accepts whatever reality is presented to him, even when it's obviously false. He's not paranoid or manic. Unlike truly crazy characters, Chris doesn't exhibit racing thoughts, persecution complexes, or extreme mood swings. He's consistently just dumb. He can function in society, barely. Chris attends school, has friends, and manages basic daily activities. He's not so disconnected from reality that he can't navigate the world at all. He shows normal emotions. Chris experiences sadness, happiness, love, and embarrassment in appropriate situations. His emotional responses are normal, even if his intellectual responses are not. He's not violent or dangerous, usually. Apart from the dream hand-cutting incident, Chris doesn't pose a threat to himself or others. He's harmless, just incredibly foolish. Chris. Compared to other Griffin family members, when stacked against his family members, Chris's brand of dysfunction becomes clearer. Versus Stewie. Stewie is a genius infant who builds time machines and weapons. He's actually crazy, plotting matricide, attempting world domination, and displaying genuine psychopathic tendencies. Chris is none of these things. He's just slow. Versus Meg. Meg has snapped multiple times, becoming violent and dangerous when pushed too far. She's kidnapped people, beaten family members, and shown genuine psychological breaks. Chris hasn't done any of this. He's annoying at worst. Versus Peter. Peter is dangerously stupid and impulsive, causing massive damage wherever he goes. He started international incidents, endangered his family repeatedly, and acted with reckless abandon. Chris is stupid, but he's not as destructive as his father, yet. Versus Lois. Lois has had complete psychological breaks, climbing Christmas trees while screaming, going on crime sprees, and acting violently. Chris has never had a breakdown like this. Versus Brian. Brian is pretentious, hypocritical, and selfish, but he's also capable of manipulation and cruelty. Chris lacks the intelligence to be manipulative. He's too stupid to scheme. The trajectory of Chris's character. Throughout Family Guy's run, Chris has remained remarkably consistent in his stupidity. While other characters have been flanderized, exaggerated versions of their original traits, Chris started dumb and stayed dumb. This consistency actually makes him one of the more predictable and stable characters on the show. The show has occasionally given Chris moments of surprising insight or talent. He's shown artistic ability with drawing, and he's had moments of emotional intelligence that surpass his intellectual intelligence. But these moments are rare exceptions that prove the rule. Chris Griffin operates at a cognitive level that makes everyday tasks challenging. The role of Chris's stupidity in Family Guy's comedy. Chris serves an important function in Family Guy's comedic ecosystem. While Stewie provides intellectual humor and Peter provides slapstick chaos, Chris provides humor through pure, unfiltered stupidity. His character allows the writers to create jokes that rely on someone being impossibly dumb without it feeling forced, because that's simply who Chris is. The 3 episodes examined here showcase different aspects of this stupidity. When You Wish Upon a Weinstein shows his gullibility. Stewie, Chris and Brian's excellent adventure shows his lack of historical and cultural knowledge. Boopity Boppity shows his inability to identify basic objects. Together, they paint a comprehensive picture of a character whose primary trait is cognitive dysfunction rather than insanity. Stupid, not crazy. After examining Chris Griffin's behavior across multiple episodes and scenarios, the verdict is clear. Chris Griffin is not crazy. He's profoundly, almost supernaturally stupid. But that's not the same as being insane. Crazy implies a break from reality, delusional thinking, dangerous impulses, or psychological dysfunction. Chris doesn't have any of these. He simply lacks the intellectual capacity to process information correctly. He believes lies because he can't identify them as lies. He fails at tasks because he doesn't understand how things work. He makes bad decisions because he can't think through consequences. In a family full of genuinely unhinged characters, a baby bent on matricide, a father who causes apocalyptic disasters, a mother who goes on criminal rampages, Chris stands out as merely dim-witted. His brand of dysfunction is less psychotic break and more failed every cognitive test imaginable. This makes Chris the least crazy character in any ranking of Family Guy's most unhinged personalities. He's not at the bottom because he's normal. He's at the bottom because his problems are intellectual rather than psychological. He's too stupid to be crazy, which, in the world of Family Guy, might actually be a blessing. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Brian Griffin. Brian Griffin, the fake smart guy. Brian Griffin is the family dog who walks like a person and thinks he's better than everyone else. He's not crazy, he's just a fake. Let's look at 3 episodes that show exactly who Brian really is. What makes Brian different? Brian isn't stupid like Chris. He isn't violent like Meg can be. He's not insane like Stewie. Brian's problem is simpler. He pretends to be smart and cultured, but he's actually a loser who drinks too much and fails at everything. He drives a Prius and thinks that makes him a good person. He reads books and thinks that makes him smart. He calls himself a writer, but nobody wants to read what he writes. Brian is the dog who thinks he's human, but he's worse than most humans because he's a total phony. Jerome is the new black. The truth comes out. This episode has the most brutal moment in Family Guy history. Brian asks Quagmire why he doesn't like him. Big mistake. Quagmire tells Brian exactly what's wrong with him, and it's a long list. First, Quagmire says Brian constantly hits on Lois, even though Peter is his best friend. Peter gives Brian food and a place to live. Peter saved Brian's life, and how does Brian repay him? By trying to steal his wife and pooping in his yard. That's not crazy behavior, that's just being a terrible friend. Next, Quagmire calls out Brian for never paying for anything. Brian always says, "I'll get you next time," but next time never comes. He's a mooch who lives off Peter's money while acting like he's too good for everyone. Then Quagmire gets really mean. He says Brian pretends to love women for their minds, but really he just dates dumb girls, like everyone else. The difference is that Quagmire admits he's shallow, but Brian lies about it. Brian buys girls a copy of Catcher in the Rye and pretends he understands deep literature. But Quagmire says Brian's understanding of the book is at a 7th grade level. He calls Holden Caulfield a spoiled brat and says, "That's why you like him so much, he's you." Quagmire keeps going. He says Brian is pretentious and thinks he's a great writer, but he's actually terrible at writing. He attacks Brian's politics, saying Brian talks about helping the homeless but never actually does anything. Quagmire says, "I work down at the soup kitchen, Brian. Never seen you down there. You want to help? Grab a ladle. The rant continues. And by the way, driving a Prius doesn't make you Jesus Christ. This line became famous because it perfectly sums up Brian. He does one small thing and acts like he's saved the world. Quagmire then says Brian doesn't believe in religion and looks down on people who do, calling them idiots. But Brian has no right to judge anyone because he failed college twice and is a failure as a father who never sees his son. The final blow, but you know what? I could forgive all of that, all of it, if you weren't such a bore. That's the worst of it, Brian. You're just a big, sad, alcoholic bore. After this speech, Brian is destroyed. He has no comeback. Everything Quagmire said is true. The episode shows Brian going home and talking to Stewie, who tells him, you don't need Quagmire to like you. You only need one person to like you. And that person is you. And I'll tell you something else. I like you. This sweet moment shows that even when Brian is awful, he has one friend who cares about him. This episode proves Brian isn't crazy. A crazy person wouldn't care what Quagmire thinks. Brian cares because deep down, he knows it's all true. He's not insane. He's just living a lie. Brian writes a bestseller. Success makes him worse. This episode shows what happens when Brian finally gets what he wants, and it makes him even more unbearable. The episode starts with Brian getting a package. It's his book, Faster Than the Speed of Love. But there's a note from his publisher. We are returning all of the unsold copies. The delivery man asks if they have a garage because there are 300 boxes of these things. Adam West appears on screen just to laugh at Brian's failure. Then Stewie looks at the boxes and discovers something funny. Look what they used to pack your book in. Shredded up pieces of your book. They literally used Brian's failed book as packing material for more copies of his failed book. Later, Stewie buys a vase and opens the box to find it packed with pages from Brian's book. Nobody wanted it. Brian is crushed. He says, I'm finished. I'm done. It's over. Clearly, I am not meant to be a writer. I have tried, and I have tried, and nothing has worked out. I put my heart out there, and it keeps getting stomped on. For once, Brian is being honest about his failures. But then Brian gets angry. He sees that the #1 book on the New York Times bestseller list is Dream Your Way to Spiritual Joy by Pauly Shore. He complains that books like The Secret and Chicken Soup for the Soul sell millions of copies while his book fails. He says, I could crap one of those things out in a night. Stewie challenges him. Well, why don't you? Brian says he's given up writing. But Stewie makes a good point. You cared about what you wrote before. You don't care about this, so what does it matter? So Brian decides to write a cheap self-help book just to prove he can. He writes it quickly, and it becomes a massive hit. Suddenly, Brian is famous and rich. But success doesn't make Brian happy. It makes him worse. He becomes even more arrogant and full of himself. He starts acting like a celebrity, treating people badly, and forgetting who his real friends are. The episode shows Brian on Real Time with Bill Maher. This is where everything falls apart. Bill Maher and the other guests start asking Brian real questions about his book. They point out that his book doesn't actually help anyone. Bill asks, how will this help you buy a car? And Brian says, well, it does not with that attitude. He has no real answers. Another guest, Dana Gould, says the book is missing the ideas needed to help people get their goals. Bill Maher makes the killing blow. And that is another thing. Aren't wish it and want it the same thing? Your book basically makes 3 points and 2 are the same point. Brian is exposed on national TV as a fraud. His book is garbage and everyone can see it. Ariana Huffington tells him, fuck you man, when he insults her accent. After this disaster, Brian tries to apologize to Stewie. But even his apology is terrible. He says, I'm sorry that I made you uncomfortable and put you in a situation that you clearly couldn't handle. Stewie catches this immediately. Okay, there it is again. What the hell? Stop with that. Brian is apologizing while also insulting Stewie, saying Stewie was in over his head and made many errors. Stewie finally says, that's as good as it's going to get, isn't it? And Brian admits, pretty much. Then Stewie delivers the final truth. You can't write. This episode shows that Brian can't handle success or failure. When he fails, he whines. When he succeeds, he becomes unbearable. Either way, he never learns or changes. Our idiot Brian, proof he's not smart. This episode destroys Brian's last claim to superiority, 2cm, his intelligence. Meg needs someone to take her SAT test for her, and Brian agrees because he thinks he's smart. Big mistake. Brian takes the test and is confident he did well. But when the scores come back, he gets a 1,000 out of 2,400. That's terrible. The scoring system changed, and Brian didn't even know it. His score proves he's not smart at all. Brian is devastated. His whole identity is built on being the smart one in the family. Now, there's proof he's not. He falls into depression. Peter sees an opportunity. He decides to teach Brian how to be dumb and happy. Peter says, "It's fun being stupid. You don't gotta worry about nothing. You don't gotta read books, and you never die." Brian corrects him. "Peter, that's not correct." Peter responds, "How would you know, stupid?" Chris and Stewie laugh at Brian. The episode shows Brian becoming dumber. He starts saying things like, "awesome sauce," and "bazinga." He gets a nosebleed and Peter says, "Gross, he's getting his nose, period." Brian goes to see Dr. Hartman, who says, "I did a CAT scan." Peter laughs, "On a dog and doctor." Hartman admits, "We laughed about that too." Eventually, Stewie can't take it anymore. He yells, "Either take the tumor out of him or put one in me. I can't stand this." He wants the old Brian back, even though the old Brian was pretentious and annoying. At the end, Brian complains to Stewie, "I mean, I was having fun, making new friends, getting laid all the time, sleeping like a rock, but you made the call. You unilaterally decided I was better off a bitter alcoholic failure who could only hang out with a baby. This is brutal because it's true. Brian has to choose between being dumb and happy or smart and miserable. But the episode proved he was never that smart anyway. He just thought he was. Why Brian isn't crazy. Looking at all 3 episodes, Brian shows a consistent pattern. He's not insane or psychotic. He doesn't have delusions or hear voices. He's not violent or dangerous. He's just deeply insecure and covers it up with fake superiority. He knows the truth about himself. When Quagmire lists his faults, Brian can't argue. When his book fails, he admits he's not a good writer. When he scores low on the SAT, he realizes he's not smart. A truly crazy person wouldn't accept these truths. He cares what people think. Brian is devastated when Quagmire hates him, when his book fails, and when he's humiliated on TV. Crazy people often don't care about social judgment. He has real relationships. Despite everything, Stewie genuinely cares about Brian. They have a real friendship. Crazy people often can't maintain relationships like this. He's aware of his drinking problem. Multiple episodes reference Brian being an alcoholic. He knows it's a problem, but he doesn't stop. That's addiction, not insanity. He's selfish, not delusional. Brian's problems come from selfishness and insecurity, not from a break with reality. He knows what's real. He just doesn't want to accept it. Brian's real problem. Brian's core issue is that he's a dog who wants to be human and a failure who wants to be successful. He can't accept what he really is, so he creates a fake version of himself. He pretends to be smart, cultured, and moral, but he's actually average, superficial, and selfish. The 3 episodes show different aspects of this problem. Jerome is the New Black shows how other people see through his act. Brian writes a bestseller, shows what happens when he gets what he wants. It doesn't make him happy. Our idiot Brian proves he was never as smart as he thought. How Brian compares to actually crazy characters. When you look at the truly crazy characters in Family Guy, Brian doesn't measure up. Stewie builds weapons and time machines, plots to kill his mother, and has actually become a dictator in alternate timelines. That's genuinely insane. Peter causes disasters constantly, becomes death himself, starts international incidents, and never learns from his mistakes. That's dangerous crazy. Lois has complete mental breakdowns where she climbs buildings and attacks people. That's psychotic breaks. Meg snaps and becomes violent when pushed too far. That's trauma response leading to crazy behavior. Quagmire commits actual crimes, including kidnapping and murder. That's criminal insanity. Brian? He drinks too much, lies about who he is, and fails at his dreams. That's sad, but it's not crazy. He's a loser pretending to be a winner. He's a dog pretending to be a sophisticated human. He's a bad writer, pretending to be an artist. Brian Griffin ranks low on the crazy scale because his problems are rooted in reality. He has real failures that he can't face. He has real insecurities that he covers with fake confidence. He has real flaws that everyone can see except him until they point them out. He's not disconnected from reality. He's just dishonest about it. He's not dangerous. He's just annoying. He's not delusional. He's just pretentious. Brian is the character who thinks he's the smartest person in the room while everyone else knows he's a fraud. The saddest part? Brian has moments where he sees the truth about himself. After Quagmire's rant, after his book fails, after his bad SAT score, PT knows. But instead of changing, he just goes back to pretending. That's not crazy. That's just being a coward. In a show full of genuinely insane people doing genuinely insane things, Brian stands out as the most painfully normal character. His problems are the problems real people have: fear of failure, need for approval, inability to change. The difference is that real people don't have a baby genius and a stupid but loving family to call them out on it. Brian Griffin, too self-aware to be crazy, too stubborn to change, too insecure to be honest. He's not the craziest character on Family Guy. He's just the most pathetic. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Meg Griffin. Meg Griffin, when the punching bag punches back. Meg Griffin sits in a unique position in the Family Guy crazy rankings. She's not stupid like Chris. She's not a fraud like Brian. Meg's problem is different. She's been abused so much that when she finally snaps, she becomes genuinely dangerous. Let's look at 3 episodes that show Meg's transformation from victim to threat. Understanding Meg's position. Meg is the oldest Griffin child and the family punching bag. Everyone treats her terribly. Her father, Peter, constantly tells her to shut up. Her mother, Lois, ignores or dismisses her. Her siblings mock her. Even the family dog looks down on her. The town bullies her. She has no friends at school. For most of the show, Meg accepts this abuse quietly. She tries desperately to fit in and be accepted, but nothing works. This isn't crazy behavior. This is sad, victim behavior. But the key question is, what happens when a victim finally breaks? These 3 episodes show us the answer. They show Meg going from helpless victim to dangerous criminal to someone who realizes violence isn't the answer. This journey is what makes Meg's craziness different from other characters. Barely legal. The kidnapping. This episode shows Meg's first major snap, though it's driven by desperation for love rather than revenge. The story starts when Meg can't find a date to her junior prom. Brian feels sorry for her and agrees to take her. At the dance, Brian gets drunk and kisses Meg. This is a huge moment for Meg because someone finally showed her affection. Someone finally treated her like she mattered. The next morning, Meg is excited. She calls Brian cutie and asks him to get coffee. She even does the "who's a good boy" routine that people do with dogs. And Brian responds positively at first, saying, "Me, I'm a good boy." But then Brian realizes what he's done and rejects her. Brian tries to explain that the kiss was a mistake. He even brings in Garrett Morris from Saturday Night Live to yell his explanations at Meg. "We're not boyfriend and girlfriend. I will never be attracted to you. You're acting like a psycho bitch." But Meg doesn't accept this. She responds, "I won't be ignored, Brian." This line is from the movie Fatal Attraction, and it signals that Meg has crossed into dangerous territory. Meg then does something shocking. She bakes a pie and puts her own hair in it. She makes Brian eat it while saying creepy things. "My hair's in the pie, Brian, and now it's inside of you. Part of me is inside of you, Brian. Do you feel me, Brian? Do you feel me inside of you?" This is genuinely disturbing behavior. It's obsessive and strange, but it gets worse. Chris mentions to Lois that he saw Meg tie up Brian last night, put him in the trunk of his car, and drive away. Meg has kidnapped Brian and is holding him hostage. When the family finds them, Meg has Brian tied up in a hotel room. She's keeping him prisoner because she can't accept that he doesn't love her. Lois has to punch Brian multiple times when he tries to explain what happened, but eventually the family rescues him. This episode shows Meg becoming obsessive and dangerous when someone shows her even a tiny bit of affection. Years of rejection have made her so desperate that one drunken kiss triggers a complete breakdown. She kidnaps someone and holds them hostage. That's not normal teenage behavior. That's a sign of serious psychological problems caused by years of abuse and rejection. Dial Meg for murder. Prison changes everything. This episode is the most important one for understanding Meg's capacity for craziness. It shows what happens when the abuse victim becomes the abuser. The episode starts with Meg dating a convict named Luke, who's in prison. They met through a school pen pal project. Meg visits him in prison and sends him letters and hair, again with the hair. It's becoming Meg's signature creepy move. Brian discovers this and tells the family. Lois forbids Meg from seeing Luke again, but Luke escapes from prison during a riot and comes to Meg's window. Meg lets him hide in her room. Brian finds Luke and tries to get Meg to see reason, but Peter reads his TV guide and discovers Meg dates a prison escapee. He calls Joe the cop, who arrests both Luke and Meg. Meg goes to jail for harboring a fugitive. 3 months later, Meg comes home, but she's completely different. She bursts through the door wearing a tank top, jeans, a bandana, and sporting a new tattoo. She announces, "I'm home, you're all my bitches now." What follows is genuinely shocking. Meg immediately attacks Peter, knocking him off the couch and stomping his face until his teeth break. She declares, "My house now, bitch." When Peter claims he's funny, Meg kicks and stomps his face more. Chris warns his father, "For God's sake, Dad, have some humility. It'll save your life." But the violence doesn't stop there. Peter is taking a shower when Meg, completely naked, steps into the shower with him holding a loofah. Peter screams, "What are you doing with that loofah?" Meg says, "Don't worry about it," and then sexually assaults Peter with the loofah. Peter screams, "You told me not to worry about it. I should have been worried the whole time." This is deeply disturbing. Meg has gone from victim to predator. She's now sexually assaulting her own father. Meg also reveals she keeps a poop bucket in her room because she's used to going to the bathroom in my room from prison. When Lois asks her to at least empty it, Meg says, "I like to fill it up. I'm not making a million trips." When Lois discovers Meg is using her shirts as toilet paper, Meg tears the sleeve off Lois's shirt and threatens, "Get out now, or stay and get weird. Your call, warden." At school, the popular kids mock Meg, as usual. Connie asks, "What'd they put you in jail for? Being ugly," and her friends laugh. But Meg calmly buys soda cans, puts them in a sack, walks up to Connie's table, and brutally attacks her with the sack of cans. She cracked 3 kids' skulls open, according to Lois. Meg then forces Stewie to punch himself in the face. When he doesn't hit hard enough, she orders Peter to punch his own baby. Peter immediately punches Stewie out of his high chair, desperate to please Meg and avoid getting hurt himself. Finally, Meg kidnaps Brian again, this time at gunpoint. She forces him to drive to Goldman's pharmacy, where she attempts armed robbery. She points a gun at Mort Goldman and demands his money. Brian stops her by showing her an article he wrote about her for Teen People magazine. The article says nice things about Meg, calling her sweet and kind with uncommon resilience. This reminds Meg of who she really is, and she gives up the gun. The episode ends with Meg back to normal, accepting her role as the family punching bag. She realizes that being the target of everyone's abuse actually keeps the family together. If they didn't have Meg to pick on, they'd turn on each other. This episode shows Meg at her craziest. She commits assault, battery, sexual assault, armed robbery, and terrorizes her entire family. But here's the key point. This isn't random crazy behavior. This is the direct result of abuse. Prison took Meg's built-up anger and gave her the tools and mindset to fight back. The penal system, as Brian points out, turns small-time offenders into hardened criminals. A fistful of Meg fighting back. This shorter episode shows another side of Meg snapping, this time at school. Meg bumps into a new student named Mike Pulaski, a violent bully. She spills her lunch on him and he threatens to fight her after school. Meg is terrified and can't find a way out of it. Quagmire finds Meg crying in the bathroom. He reveals that he was once bullied by a girl named Tracy Bellings, who forced him into a long sexually abusive relationship. He decides to help Meg learn to fight. After training with Quagmire, Meg faces Mike. She's getting beaten badly at first. Her face gets punched pretty, according to one student, then punched ugly again. But Meg finds an unusual way to win. She kisses Mike, pops a pimple on him, then lifts up her shirt. Everyone looks away except Mike, who sees whatever horror is under Meg's shirt. He literally melts from the sight. The episode ends with Meg narrating that she lived to tell the story for a long time. She reveals she died a year later from septic shock due to her body's reaction to a frozen hot dog. This episode is less about Meg being crazy and more about her learning to defend herself. But it still shows that when Meg is pushed to her limit, she can become aggressive and violent. The difference is that here, she's defending herself rather than attacking innocent people like in Dial Meg for Murder. Why Meg's crazy is different. Meg's brand of crazy is unique among Family Guy characters because it's reactive, not proactive. Meg doesn't start conflicts. She doesn't seek out violence. She only becomes dangerous when pushed to her absolute breaking point or when abuse changes her personality completely. It's temporary. Unlike Stewie, who is consistently plotting evil, or Peter, who is always causing disasters, Meg's crazy episodes are brief. She snaps, causes chaos, then returns to normal. She's capable of recognizing when she's gone too far. It's trauma-based. Meg's behavior comes directly from years of abuse and rejection. A normal, loved teenager wouldn't kidnap someone over one kiss. A normal, loved daughter wouldn't sexually assault her father. But Meg isn't normal or loved. She's been broken by constant mistreatment. She feels guilty. When Brian shows Meg the article he wrote about her, she immediately feels remorse. She says, "Oh my God, I can't believe I did this. I was just so tired of being everyone's whipping girl that it felt kind of good to do some of the whipping." This shows self-awareness that truly crazy people don't have. She chooses to return to abuse. The most heartbreaking part of Meg's story is that she consciously decides to go back to being the family punching bag. She realizes that her abuse serves a purpose. It keeps the family from destroying each other. This isn't crazy, it's tragically self-sacrificing. Comparing Meg to other characters. Versus Stewie. Stewie is born evil and plots murder for fun. Meg becomes violent only after extreme provocation or trauma. Stewie is crazy by nature. Meg is broken by nurture. Versus Peter. Peter causes chaos constantly without learning or caring. Meg feels remorse and tries to change. Versus Lois. Lois has psychotic breaks over stress. Meg's breaks are caused by specific traumatic events like prison or years of bullying. Versus Brian. Brian is delusional about who he is. Meg knows exactly who she is, a victim who briefly fought back. The tragedy of Meg. What makes Meg's story so dark is that she's not really crazy at all. She's a normal teenager who's been psychologically destroyed by her environment. When she finally snaps and becomes dangerous, it's not because there's something wrong with her brain, it's because there's something wrong with how everyone treats her. The episodes show a clear pattern. Meg is abused, divided by rejected. Meg desperately seeks acceptance. Meg is rejected again or traumatized further. Meg snaps and becomes violent. Meg feels guilty and returns to normal. The cycle starts again. This isn't insanity. This is the predictable result of prolonged abuse. Real abuse victims sometimes do become violent. Real people who are constantly rejected sometimes become obsessive. Real prisoners sometimes do come out worse than they went in. Meg ranks relatively low on the crazy scale because her crazy behaviors are understandable reactions to extreme circumstances. She's not hearing voices or plotting world domination or causing disasters for fun. She's a traumatized person lashing out. Meg Griffin is what happens when you push someone too far for too long. She's capable of kidnapping, assault, armed robbery, and sexual violence, but only after being driven to it by years of mistreatment. Her craziness is situational and temporary, not permanent and pathological. In a family of genuinely insane people, Meg stands out as someone who could be normal if only someone treated her with basic human decency. Instead, she's trapped in a cycle of abuse that occasionally transforms her into someone dangerous. That's not crazy, that's just sad. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Ernie the Giant Chicken. Ernie the Giant Chicken, Peter's eternal enemy. Ernie the Giant Chicken, also known simply as the Giant Chicken, represents a unique type of crazy in the Family Guy universe. He's not a main character, but his explosive fights with Peter Griffin have become one of the show's most famous recurring gags. Unlike other characters whose crazy stems from stupidity, trauma, or psychological issues, Ernie's insanity is purely driven by an unending, violent grudge over the smallest slight imaginable. Who is Ernie the Giant Chicken? Ernie is exactly what his name suggests, a giant chicken who wears human clothes and lives in Quahog. He's voiced by Danny Smith and has appeared sporadically throughout the series, always resulting in massive destruction. The key to understanding Ernie is recognizing that he's not actually insane in the traditional sense. He's a normal chicken, as normal as a giant anthropomorphic chicken can be, who happens to have an all-consuming hatred for Peter Griffin. This hatred drives him to commit acts of incredible violence whenever he encounters Peter. The origin of the feud. The entire Peter versus Giant Chicken saga started over something absurdly trivial. In the early seasons, it's established that Ernie gave Peter an expired coupon. That's it. That's the whole reason for their blood feud. Peter complained about the bad coupon, Ernie took offense, and their first brutal fight began. This ridiculous origin is part of what makes their rivalry so funny and so crazy. Most people would shrug off an expired coupon. Maybe they'd be mildly annoyed. But Ernie and Peter have destroyed entire city blocks, caused millions of dollars in property damage, and nearly killed each other multiple times, all because of a coupon that probably wasn't worth more than $1. The nature of their fights. The Peter and Ernie fights follow a consistent pattern. Peter will be going about his day when suddenly, without warning, Ernie appears and attacks him. The camera shows Ernie leaping at Peter from off-screen, and then an epic battle begins. These fights are extraordinary in their scale and destruction. They're animated like action movie sequences, often lasting several minutes of screen time. Peter and Ernie punch, kick, throw, and slam each other through buildings, vehicles, and anything else in their path. From Blind Ambition, we see a typical example. Peter is in the middle of talking about Quagmire when the giant chicken leaps at Peter from off-screen and attacks him, and the two engage in a fight down Spooner Street. The fight escalates dramatically, with them crashing through a glass ceiling. The transcript notes that Peter protects himself as the propeller approaches the chicken. The chicken turns around and yells and is struck by the propeller. These fights often end with one of them apparently dead or severely injured, only for them to return in later episodes completely fine. In Blind Ambition, after the propeller hits the chicken, a battered Peter walks away into the horizon, and the chicken's talon twitches, suggesting Ernie survived despite horrific injuries. The fights parody action movies, particularly the extended combat sequences found in films like They Live or Jackie Chan movies. They're meant to be over the top and absurd, but they also showcase genuine animosity between the two characters. Fecal Matters. The chicken gets sick. The episode Fecal Matters provides the most character development Ernie has ever received. It shows him not as just a violent antagonist, but as a person with a life outside of fighting Peter. The episode reveals that Ernie has fallen on hard times. When Peter encounters him in the hospital, Ernie explains his situation. There's nothing left for me in this world. I lost my job. I lost my house. My wife left me for a bigger cock. Peter makes a joke to the audience. Cocks are chickens, clarifying that Ernie's wife left him for another rooster, not in the crude sense. This moment of comedy doesn't hide the fact that Ernie is genuinely depressed and suicidal. He tells Peter, "I'm better off dead." Peter's response is telling. Instead of showing sympathy, he says, "Oh, that's sad. I agree. I guess that means I win, huh?" Even when his enemy is at rock bottom, contemplating suicide, Peter only cares about their rivalry. This shows that Peter is just as obsessed with their feud as Ernie is. The episode reveals that Ernie has bird flu, a serious illness. But here's where it gets darker. When Peter suggests there's a vaccine for bird flu, Ernie refuses it. Yeah, loaded with mercury and antifreeze. No thank you. Ernie is an anti-vaxxer. He's so paranoid about vaccines that he'd rather die of bird flu than get treated. Peter's reaction is perfect. I knew I hated you for a good reason. This reveals something important about Ernie's character. He's not just violently crazy, he's also conspiratorially crazy. He believes anti-vaccination propaganda even when it's literally killing him. This adds another layer to his insanity beyond just the violent grudge. The hospital confrontation. As Ernie lies dying in the hospital, we see more of his personality. Despite being enemies, Peter stays with him. Peter even mentions, "Well, a win's a win even if it's like this. It's too bad. I had an awesome line I was gonna say when I finally beat you." Ernie asks to hear the line. There's a long pause, and Peter admits, "I gotta go." This moment of awkwardness shows that for all their fighting, there's a strange connection between them. Peter doesn't actually want Ernie to die like this, not from illness, anyway. Ernie's daughter Nicole arrives with her husband. Peter makes a crude joke when he sees them. "Holy moly, that's a huge cock," referring to Nicole's rooster husband. This is typical Peter humor, inappropriate even at a deathbed. The doctor declares, "Time of death, Bob," followed by 8-8. The doctor then proudly announces, "I know numbers," showing the typical incompetence of Dr. Hartman. But Peter isn't satisfied with this ending. Peter saves his enemy. In a surprising turn, Peter decides to save Ernie's life. He performs some kind of medical intervention, the transcript doesn't specify exactly what, and brings Ernie back from death. Ernie is confused. "You saved me? Why?" Peter's answer reveals the true nature of their relationship and why it's actually a form of shared insanity. "Because I hate you. Every day, I wake up not knowing if you're gonna come out of nowhere and punch me in the face. I flinch every time a door opens. I look over my shoulder every time I bend down to tie my shoes, and I flip my porch light on every night before I go to bed just to see if you're standing there. Do you have any idea how exciting that is? So I didn't save your life because I like you. I saved it because I hate you." This speech is crucial to understanding both Peter and Ernie's insanity. Peter lives in constant fear and anticipation of Ernie's attacks. This fear has become such a part of his life that losing it would actually make his life less interesting. He's addicted to the danger and excitement of their rivalry. Peter then adds a practical reason. "Also, if you die, I'll be solely responsible for all the destruction we've caused over the years, so this decision is both emotional and financial." Ernie smiles and responds, "I hate you too, Peter Griffin." This mutual hatred has become the foundation of their relationship. They need each other, not despite the hatred, but because of it. The final scene. The episode ends with Peter at home, flipping on his porch light to check if Ernie is there. And he is. Ernie stands there in the darkness, waiting. Peter's response? Simply, "Good." This ending shows that their relationship has returned to its normal pattern. Ernie will continue ambushing Peter. Peter will continue fighting back. The cycle of violence continues, and both of them are satisfied with this arrangement. Why Ernie's crazy is unique. Ernie the Giant Chicken represents a specific type of insanity that's different from other Family Guy characters. Single-minded obsession. Unlike Stewie, who has multiple schemes and interests, or Peter, who causes chaos in various ways, Ernie's entire existence seems focused on one thing: fighting Peter Griffin. He doesn't plot world domination or cause random disasters. He just attacks Peter. Proportional response failure. The inability to let go of a minor slight, an expired coupon, and instead escalating it to attempted murder dozens of times shows a complete failure of proportional response. Normal people get over small insults. Ernie has made it his life's purpose to destroy Peter over something trivial. Mutual insanity. What makes Ernie unique is that his crazy is shared. Peter is equally obsessed with their rivalry. They feed off each other's hatred. Neither can walk away. This creates a loop of violence that neither wants to escape. Functional insanity. Despite being locked in this violent feud, Ernie had a job, a house, and a wife until he lost them all. He's capable of functioning in society between attacks on Peter. He's not completely disconnected from reality, he's just selectively insane about one specific person. Suicidal stubbornness. Ernie's refusal to get vaccinated because of conspiracy theories, even when dying, shows he'd rather die than admit he's wrong. This isn't just stubbornness, it's pathological inability to accept help or acknowledge reality. Comparing Ernie to other characters. Versus Stewie. Stewie plots elaborate schemes for world domination and matricide. Ernie just wants to punch Peter. Stewie is strategic crazy. Ernie is impulsive crazy. Versus Peter. While Peter causes chaos everywhere, he's not focused on one enemy, except Ernie. Peter's destruction is accidental or careless. Ernie's destruction is targeted and intentional. Versus Meg. Meg snaps temporarily due to abuse and then returns to normal. Ernie never snaps and never returns to normal. He's in a permanent state of grudge-fueled rage toward Peter. Versus Brian. Brian's problems are internal. He's delusional about his own abilities and character. Ernie's problems are external. His hatred is directed outward at a specific target. Versus Lois. Lois has occasional psychotic breaks under stress. Ernie is in a constant state of readiness to attack Peter. His crazy isn't episodic, it's continuous. The psychology of the feud. What makes Ernie truly crazy is that he can't let go. Most people have been wronged in small ways, bad service, minor insults, petty slights. Normal people move on. They might be annoyed for a day or complain to friends, but they don't dedicate their lives to revenge. Ernie can't move on. The expired coupon became the defining event of his life. Everything else, his job, his house, his marriage, fell apart, possibly because he was so focused on his hatred of Peter. His wife left him, his life collapsed, and even facing death, his primary concern is still his rivalry with Peter. This represents a form of insanity that's recognizable in real life. People who can't let go of grudges, who let minor conflicts consume their entire existence, who would rather die than forgive or forget. Ernie is an extreme cartoon version of this very real psychological problem. Peter's participation in this insanity is equally important. He saves Ernie's life not out of compassion but because he needs his enemy. The excitement of never knowing when Ernie will attack has become essential to Peter's life. He's addicted to the adrenaline and danger. Ernie the Giant Chicken is crazy, but it's a focused, purposeful crazy. He's not disconnected from reality. He's not hearing voices or having delusions. He simply cannot forgive a minor slight and has built his entire existence around violent revenge. In the ranking of Family Guy's craziest characters, Ernie occupies an interesting position. He's more dangerous than Chris, who's just dumb, and more focused than Peter, who causes chaos everywhere. But he's less comprehensively insane than Stewie, who plots actual world domination, and less unpredictable than Lois, whose psychotic breaks come out of nowhere. Ernie is crazy in a very specific way. He's the embodiment of a grudge taken to its absolute extreme. He represents what happens when someone can't let things go, when minor conflicts become defining battles, when hatred becomes identity. The fact that he stands on Peter's porch at night, waiting to be seen, shows that he needs this rivalry as much as Peter does. He could ambush Peter anywhere, anytime, but he makes himself visible because he wants Peter to know he's there. He wants the fear and anticipation to continue. That's not just crazy, that's a shared addiction to violence and hatred. And in the world of Family Guy, it's one of the most honest and pure forms of insanity the show has ever created. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Carter Pewter Schmidt. Carter Pewter Schmidt, the evil billionaire. Carter Pewter Schmidt, Lois Griffin's father, represents a different kind of crazy in the Family Guy universe. He's not stupid like Chris, not a fraud like Brian, and not driven by grudges like Ernie the Giant Chicken. Carter's insanity comes from being so wealthy and powerful that he's completely disconnected from normal human morality. He's a billionaire who values money over human life, and these 3 episodes show just how far he'll go. Who is Carter Pewter Schmidt? Carter is Lois's father and Peter's father-in-law. He's extremely wealthy, owning Pewter Schmidt Industries and living in a mansion. He's married to Barbara Pewter Schmidt and represents old money and corporate greed. Unlike most Family Guy characters whose crazy comes from psychological problems, Carter's insanity stems from having too much power and zero accountability. Carter looks down on Peter constantly, viewing him as lower class and unworthy of his daughter. But as these episodes show, Carter's own moral failings far exceed anything Peter has done. Carter may be rich and successful, but he's fundamentally broken in ways that money can't fix. The Old Man and the Big C, hiding the cancer cure. This episode reveals the darkest aspect of Carter's character. The plot starts innocently enough, with Quagmire losing his toupee at a ball game and becoming an old man without it. But the real story begins when Brian wanders around the hospital and overhears shocking news. Carter Schmidt has terminal cancer. Brian tells Stewie, who confirms it by checking online cameras in the Schmidt house. Brian then tells Lois, and the whole family rushes to Carter's home, expecting to say goodbye to a dying man. But when they arrive, Carter is perfectly healthy. Brian looks like a liar and loses all credibility with the family. But Brian isn't wrong. He suspects Carter is hiding something and convinces Stewie to help investigate. They follow Carter around, trying to prove something suspicious is happening. What they discover is much worse than they imagined. Carter hasn't just recovered from cancer. He has the cure for cancer, the actual cure that would save millions of lives, and he's been hiding it. When confronted, Carter reveals the horrifying truth. He has been sitting on the cure since 1,999 inches, ordered to protect his sales of treatment pharmaceuticals. Read that again. Since 1999, Carter has had the cure for cancer for over a decade. At the time this episode aired, in 2012. He's watched millions of people die painful deaths from cancer, including possibly friends, colleagues, maybe even people he knew, and he did nothing. He let them all die so he could keep making money selling cancer treatments. This isn't just evil. This is a level of sociopathic behavior that's hard to comprehend. Carter values his pharmaceutical profits more than millions of human lives. He throws Brian and Stewie out of his house after revealing this, showing no remorse or shame. Brian is furious on the drive home, but Stewie reveals he stole the cure. They bring it to Lois to expose Carter's crime, but Carter shows up to take it back. When Brian tells Lois what it is, she's horrified. Lois tries to appeal to Carter's humanity. She brings up some of his closest loved ones, possibly dying of cancer, and he finally promises to reveal the cure. This seems like a victory. Carter will do the right thing and save countless lives. But the next day, Carter holds a press conference. Instead of revealing the cancer cure, he only announces a new deodorant. It's another betrayal, another lie. Lois calls him, demanding to know why he broke his promise. Carter's response is chilling in its simplicity. He lied. That's it. He lied to his own daughter's face about saving millions of lives, and he feels no guilt about it. He just blows her off. Peter tries to comfort Lois by saying they'll get over Carter being a bad man when he appears on a magazine cover. And that's exactly what happens. Carter appears on the cover of Forbes magazine, and everyone forgets about his crimes. Wealth and success erase moral failings in the public eye. This episode shows Carter at his absolute worst. He's willing to let millions die for profit. He lies to his own daughter without hesitation. He has no empathy, no conscience, no human decency. The cancer cure storyline reveals Carter as a genuine monster dressed in a business suit. Fresh Air, the incest plot. If The Old Man and the Big C shows Carter's evil on a global scale, Fresh Air shows his dysfunction on a personal level. This episode deals with Carter's will and inheritance, leading to one of the most disturbing plots in Family Guy history. The episode starts with Chris trying to spend time with Peter. He asks, "Hey Dad, are you busy? I was thinking we could spend some time together." Peter's response shows his priorities. "Okay, are you a television set or the internet?" When Chris says no, Peter dismisses him completely. "Oh, then no." This sets up the family dynamic. Peter doesn't value time with his son. He's a terrible father, but somehow, he's still better than what comes next. Carter mentions he broke his leg and complains, "The worst part about it is I can't have sex. God, I wish there was a way I could just do it myself, just to be done, and napping within 4 minutes." Chris then teaches Carter how to masturbate. The transcript shows, "Let me show you something," followed by a time-lapse where Carter looks relaxed and amazed. Carter is shocked to learn you can do it basically whenever you're not doing something else. This is already inappropriate and weird. A teenage boy teaching his elderly grandfather about masturbation is crossing multiple boundaries. But it's just the beginning of the dysfunction. Carter becomes so impressed with Chris that he decides to change his will and leave everything to Chris instead of Lois. This leads to Peter plotting to marry Chris to get the inheritance money. Yes, you read that correctly. Peter plans to marry his own son to get Carter's money. The quotes from the transcript show how insane this gets. Chris Griffin, will you marry me? What? Is it even legal for a man to marry his son? It is in Vermont. As long as it's a man and a man, anything goes up there. They're a bunch of liberal degenerates. Peter is literally proposing marriage to his teenage son. Chris questions this, saying, I don't know, it seems really weird. I mean, aren't men supposed to marry women? Peter's response shows how warped his thinking has become. No, that's just all of human history except for the last 5 months. He's using recent gay marriage legalization to justify incest, which is completely insane logic. The episode goes to dark places. Peter kills a child as a romantic gesture for Chris. The transcript notes, Hey Chris, remember that kid you said was bullying you at school? Well, here's his head. Chris screams, That's not even him, that's the deaf kid. Peter responds, Oh, that was sign language. I thought he was trying to defend himself with terrible karate. Peter murdered an innocent deaf child, thinking it would impress Chris. This is beyond crazy. This is psychopathic behavior driven entirely by greed. The episode also features Peter's hairless twin brother escaping and holding the family hostage, demanding to eat all the garbage we want. Peter later shoots this twin, showing Peter's capacity for violence when convenient. Joe witnesses Peter's plan to marry Chris and has an existential crisis, grabbing his own son, Kevin's hand, saying, I don't know what normal is anymore. This line captures how disturbing Peter's behavior has become. It's breaking other characters' sense of reality. While this episode focuses more on Peter's insanity, it starts with Carter's decision to cut his own daughter out of his will in favor of his grandson. Carter's willingness to manipulate his family's relationships through money and his inappropriate relationship with Chris sets all the horrible events in motion. Grumpy Old Man, Carter's everyday toxicity. Grumpy Old Man shows Carter in a more mundane setting, revealing his everyday awfulness rather than grand evil schemes. The episode involves Carter spending time at the Drunken Clam with Peter and his friends. A key scene shows Carter's complete lack of respect for his own daughter. Peter starts to complain. Well, we usually just sit here and complain about our lives. Like this morning, Lois was such a pain in the ass. Carter immediately interrupts. Hey, that's my daughter you're talking about. This seems like Carter defending Lois. But then Peter rephrases, Oh, I mean this red-headed lady who lives in my bed was a real pain in the ass this morning. Carter's response shows his true character. Oh, she sounds like a bitch. Yeah, what a bitch. Bitchazoid, right guys? Yeah, I hope you're doing her. Peter confirms, oh, big time. And Carter responds, Yeah, that's hot. That's hot. I'm gonna think about that tonight. Let's break down what just happened. Carter defended Lois when Peter said her name directly. But the moment Peter describes her without using her name, Carter calls his own daughter a bitch and bitchazoid and expresses sexual interest in her relationship with Peter, saying he'll think about it that night. This is deeply disturbing. Carter doesn't actually care about respecting Lois. He only cares about appearances and technicalities. As long as Peter doesn't use Lois's name, Carter is fine calling her terrible things and making inappropriate sexual comments about his own daughter. This scene reveals Carter's superficiality. He has no real values or principles. He only cares about surface-level propriety. He'll defend his daughter's name while degrading who she is as a person. He'll make incestuous comments as long as they're technically indirect. The episode also features cutaway gags showing various forms of dysfunction, including a drill sergeant with Alzheimer's who keeps forgetting he already asked a soldier's name, and Mayor Adam West having nested dreams about broken eggs and parenting readiness. These gags provide comic relief, but also reinforce the theme of mental deterioration and confused thinking. Why Carter's crazy is dangerous. Carter Pewterschmidt represents the most dangerous kind of insanity in Family Guy because he has real power. Unlike Peter, who causes chaos but is ultimately powerless, Carter controls a business empire. His decisions affect millions of people. When he decides to hide the cancer cure, millions die. His insanity has global consequences. He's completely rational. Carter isn't stupid or impulsive. He makes calculated decisions based on profit. His evil isn't accidental. It's deliberate and strategic. This makes him more dangerous than characters who act crazy without thinking. He feels no guilt. When confronted about the cancer cure, Carter shows zero remorse. He doesn't justify his actions or make excuses. He simply doesn't care. This lack of empathy is sociopathic. He uses wealth as a shield. Carter's money protects him from consequences. He appears on Forbes magazine covers despite being a monster. Society rewards his success while ignoring his crimes. He's untouchable. He corrupts those around him. Carter's influence causes other characters to act insane. Peter tries to marry Chris because of Carter's will. The family overlooks Carter's evil because of his wealth. His toxicity spreads. He hides behind respectability. Unlike obviously crazy characters, Carter maintains a respectable appearance. He wears suits, runs a business, lives in a mansion. His evil is dressed in legitimacy, making it harder to recognize and fight. Comparing Carter to other characters. Versus Stewie. Stewie plots world domination, but he's a baby with limited power. Carter has actually achieved power and uses it for evil. Stewie is theoretical evil. Carter is practical evil. Versus Peter. Peter causes destruction through stupidity. Carter causes destruction through calculated greed. Peter would probably share a cancer cure if he had it. Carter deliberately hides it. Versus Ernie. Ernie's violence is personal and direct. He physically attacks Peter. Carter's violence is systemic and indirect. He lets millions die through inaction. Ernie is more honest about his hatred. Versus Brian. Brian pretends to be moral while being selfish. Carter doesn't even pretend. He openly admits to valuing money over lives and sees nothing wrong with it. Versus Meg. Meg's violence comes from being pushed too far. Carter's evil comes from never being pushed at all. He's had everything handed to him, and it's made him a monster. Carter Pewterschmidt ranks very high on the Family Guy crazy scale because his insanity is both comprehensive and consequential. He's not crazy in the sense of being disconnected from reality. He understands reality perfectly. He just doesn't care about anyone but himself. The cancer cure storyline alone makes Carter one of the most evil characters in the show. Millions dead for profit isn't crazy in the chaotic sense. It's crazy in the sociopathic sense. It's the banality of evil, the businessman who sees mass death as an acceptable cost of doing business. His willingness to corrupt family relationships through inheritance, manipulation, his inappropriate comments about his own daughter, his complete lack of empathy, all of this paints a picture of someone fundamentally broken. Carter has everything money can buy, but he's lost his humanity in the process. In a show full of characters who cause harm through stupidity, impulse, or psychological breaks, Carter stands out as someone who causes harm through cold calculation. He's proof that sanity and morality aren't the same thing. You can be perfectly rational and still be a monster. Carter Pewterschmidt, wealthy, powerful, respected, and absolutely insane in the most dangerous way possible. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Lois Griffin. Lois Griffin, the ticking time bomb. Lois Griffin occupies a fascinating position in the Family Guy crazy rankings. For most episodes, she's the voice of reason, the stable adult trying to hold her chaotic family together. But when Lois snaps, she doesn't just lose control. She becomes genuinely dangerous, committing crimes and acts of violence that rival anything the show's crazy characters do. These episodes show that Lois's sanity isn't stable. It's a dam, barely holding back, complete psychosis. Who is Lois Griffin? Lois is the matriarch of the Griffin family, wife to Peter, and mother to Meg, Chris, and Stewie. Voiced by Alex Borstein, Lois comes from wealth. Carter Pewterschmidt is a billionaire. She gave up a privileged life to marry Peter, a decision her father never forgave. On the surface, Lois seems normal. She tries to be a good mother. She attempts to manage Peter's stupidity. She represents stability in a household of chaos. But this stability is an illusion. Lois is constantly under pressure, constantly managing disasters, constantly suppressing her own needs and desires. And when that pressure becomes too much, Lois doesn't just crack, she explodes. Breaking out is hard to do. The criminal awakening. This episode shows Lois's first major descent into criminal behavior, and it starts with something ridiculously small, a ham. The episode opens with Lois at the supermarket with her family. Chris falls out of the egg section, prompting Lois to ask, "Chris, where have you been?" His response, "I don't know. perfectly captures the absurdity of her daily life managing this family. At some point during this shopping trip, Lois sees a ham she can't afford. In a moment of weakness, she steals it. This one act of theft opens a door that Lois didn't know existed inside her. She discovers she enjoys stealing. What starts with one ham escalates rapidly. Lois begins stealing everything: clothes, expensive objects, art, even car parts. The transcript mentions her stealing mufflers at one point. She's become a full-blown kleptomaniac, and she loves it. Lois tries to explain her behavior to Quagmire, though her explanation takes an unintentionally sexual turn. I felt like I had a void in my life, like there was a secret hole in me. Quagmire immediately responds, "Oh God." Lois continues, oblivious. "And I was trying to fill that hole with all kinds of expensive objects and things." "Oh Gahhood," Quagmire moans. "And I felt wonderful with all those things filling that hole. Oh gahahahahahahad." Lois then says something even Quagmire catches. "I did this to myself, so just gonna have to lay back and the penal system teach me a lesson." Quagmire notes, that one is also sexual. Despite the innuendo, Lois's explanation reveals something important. She had a void in her life. Being Peter's wife and the family caretaker left her empty. Stealing filled that emptiness. The thrill of crime gave her something being a good wife and mother never could. Eventually, Lois gets caught and goes to court. The judge is about to give her a warning when Peter's stupidity makes everything worse. The judge sentences Lois to 2 years in prison. Peter sneezes, and the judge adds another year. Peter says, "That was a sneeze," and the judge adds another year. By the time Peter calls him a douchebag, Lois is sentenced to 3 years. The family falls apart without Lois. The house becomes chaos. Peter can't function. The kids struggle. They realize they need her back, so they break her out of prison. The family escapes to Quahog's Asian town, which combines stereotypes of Chinatown and Little Tokyo. They try to start new lives there. Chris becomes a rickshaw driver. Stewie works in a sweatshop sewing shoes until he accidentally sews a shoe to his own hand. Peter becomes a sumo wrestler. But Peter appears on TV during a sumo match, and Joe tracks them down. The family flees through Asian Town, ending up in the sewers where they encounter characters from the Goonies. The transcript notes, Corey Haim lives down there and chases a rat yelling, "Mine." Eventually Joe catches them, and Lois faces the consequences of her crimes. But the episode established something crucial about Lois's character. Underneath her responsible exterior lurks a criminal who enjoys breaking the law. The stable wife and mother is one bad day away from becoming a thief and fugitive. Play it again, Brian, the cheating heart. While breaking out is hard to do, showed Lois's criminal side. Play it again, Brian, reveals her capacity for emotional betrayal and the cracks in her marriage to Peter. The episode begins with Peter repeatedly ditching Lois to go fishing, beekeeping, or do other activities with his friends. Every time Lois expects him to join her for something important, she turns around to find Peter dressed in fishing gear, diving gear, or a beekeeper suit. When Peter cancels on her wedding day lunch with her parents, Lois reflects on their wedding. The flashback shows the minister saying, "You may now kiss the bride," and Peter responding, "Kiss her? I am going to destroy her." This crude joke foreshadows the destruction of their relationship. The pattern continues. Peter misses putting flowers on Lois's grandmother's grave. Then, one night, Lois announces it's sex night, their scheduled time for intimacy. She calls for Peter, only to find him in a beekeeper suit. "Lois, I know it's late, but me and the guys were going beekeeping." Peter's constant neglect leaves Lois vulnerable. Brian, who has always had feelings for Lois, sees an opportunity. When Peter leaves Lois alone at a hotel, Brian writes an essay about his feelings for her. She was Grace, in name and in essence. To those she loved, she exuded strength, life, laughter, and light, and to me, also sorrow for circumstance that had bound her to my best friend, through whom we met in the warmth and serenity of her home. Nothing from the first day I saw her, and no one that has happened to me since, has ever been as frightening and as confusing. For no person I've ever known has ever done more to make me feel more sure, more insecure, more important, and less significant. Brian plans an evening with Lois, dakes, wine, sundaes, music, candlelight. He fantasizes about kissing her, imagining himself saying, "Lois, my darling." But then he stops himself. Whoa, 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 whoa. What am I doing? This is Lois, Peter's wife. How could I think about trying anything? But Brian does try something. The transcript doesn't specify exactly what happened, but later Brian confesses to Stewie. "I pretty much just threw myself at Lois." The conversation that follows is disturbing. Stewie makes crude jokes about Lois's vagina, claiming he wrecked that thing on the way out during birth and carved "Brooks was here" on the wall. He says Chris coming out first meant, "I pretty much just walked out of there, didn't even have to stoop over. There was even room to twirl a cane as I strolled." Brian insists they didn't have sex, but something happened, something that crossed a line. When Peter finds out, he's surprisingly calm at first. He asks Brian, "Was he bigger than me?" showing his priorities are wrong from the start. Later, Peter confronts Brian at a bar. Brian doesn't apologize. Instead, he attacks Peter. "You don't deserve her. She does nothing but give and give and give, and you repay her with selfishness and neglect. I mean, you've barely spent any time with her at all on this vacation." Peter defends himself by attacking Brian's relationship history. "Well, who the hell are you to tell me how to run my marriage? You can't even hang on to a girlfriend for more than a couple months." The argument escalates. Peter mentions Brian couldn't even get back together with Jillian, and she was dumber than Lou Ferrigno. Brian throws his drink at Peter. They fight. Meanwhile, Peter has accidentally married Nathan Lane after getting drunk at the hotel bar. Nathan now refers to Peter as his husband and complains when Peter breaks promises, mirroring how Peter treats Lois. The episode reveals important truths about Lois. She's in a loveless marriage with a man who neglects her constantly. She's so starved for attention and affection that Brian's romantic gesture nearly worked. She came close to cheating on Peter with the family dog. Lois ultimately doesn't go through with it, but the episode shows she's capable of betrayal when pushed far enough. Her faithfulness to Peter isn't absolute, it's conditional on him not completely abandoning her emotionally, and he came very close to crossing that line. Model misbehavior. The narcissist emerges. Model misbehavior shows a different side of Lois's potential crazy, vanity, and narcissism that emerges when she gets attention and success. The episode involves Lois becoming a model. When she starts getting photo shoots and magazine covers, her personality changes. She becomes self-absorbed and focused on her appearance and career instead of her family. Peter, showing rare awareness of appropriate boundaries, says, "Hey, that's fantastic, Lois, and I'll pleasure myself with your photos." But then Chris adds, "Me too," and Meg joins in with, "Me too." Peter is disgusted. "Ugh, oh God, Meg, that's sick. That's your mother." When Meg says she's just trying to fit in, Peter literally punches through the wall and yells, "Get out, get of this house." I said now. He physically drives Meg from the house for suggesting she'd masturbate to photos of Lois. This scene, while played for comedy, shows the family's dysfunction. Peter approves of his own sexual response to his wife's photos, but is horrified when his children have similar reactions. Meg is so desperate to fit in that she'll say anything, even something this inappropriate. Meg later tries to criticize the modeling. "Dad, how could you be okay with Mom parading herself around like this? I mean, she's half naked. It makes all women look bad." Peter's response, "Meg, who let you back in the house?" The modeling storyline reveals Lois's capacity for vanity and self-absorption. When she gets external validation and attention, she stops being the selfless mother and wife. She becomes someone who cares more about her image and career than her family's needs. The episode also features Carter Pewter-Schmidt, and we see Lois's relationship with her father. At one point, the transcript notes, "Hey, want to make him really mad, Lois? Let's have sex on his back like we used to." This disturbing line suggests Peter and Lois have a history of deliberately antagonizing Carter in crude ways. Cookie Monster appears in rehab in a cutaway, showing him with hidden cookies. When workers find his stash, he claims, "Derek was in here earlier. He was in here, making the beds. He probably put them in. I was in the John." This is typical addict behavior, denying, deflecting, blaming others. When confronted, Cookie Monster goes crazy and eats all the cookies, before being sedated while screaming, You guys are Nazis, man. You're freaking Nazis. This cutaway, while comedic, parallels Lois's own struggles with compulsive behavior. Just as Cookie Monster can't control his cookie addiction, Lois can't control her kleptomania or her need for attention when modeling. Partial terms of endearment, the abortion controversy. Partial terms of endearment is one of Family Guy's most controversial episodes, dealing with abortion and Lois's capacity to make extreme decisions. The episode involves Lois's college friend Naomi asking Lois to be a surrogate mother. This leads to discussions about Lois's past, including that she experimented quite a bit in college with Naomi. Peter's response, "No way, my wife messed around with another chick. Thank you, God." God responds directly, with a chorus singing, "God, he knows what turns you on." The pregnancy causes problems. Chris notes, "Yeah, Mom, you get crazy when you're pregnant," followed by a flashback where pregnant Lois laughs, then immediately starts crying, then demands Peter take off his belt because the buckle smells like acid. Brian raises ethical questions about abortion rights, specifically asking, what if a woman is raped? Peter's horrifying response, "Well, perhaps she should have thought of that before she asked me for directions." This exchange, while darkly comedic, shows Peter's complete lack of understanding of consent and women's rights. The episode features several disturbing lines. Stewie to Lois, "You're treating your vagina like a Red Roof Inn." Peter threatening someone, "You'll have my stool in your eye and that's all you'll get." Peter's views on unborn children. "No, Lois, I'm here to save the unborn. Once they get out of the vagina, they can go fuck themselves." The Count from Sesame Street appears in a cutaway where he sees Meg topless. He starts counting 1 nipple, ha ha ha, 2 nipples, ha ha ha, 3 nip, oh hell no, I'm outta here. This joke about Meg having 3 nipples is typical of the show's cruel treatment of her. The episode ends with Lois giving a speech about the joys and costs of having another child, talking about diapers, crying, late nights, college tuition, but concluding, it's one more person to share the world with. Peter then breaks the fourth wall. We had the abortion. This controversial ending, which got the episode banned from initial broadcast, shows Lois's willingness to make difficult, morally complex decisions. She's not bound by conventional morality when it comes to her own body and life choices. Why Lois is crazy is dangerous. Lois Griffin's brand of insanity is particularly dangerous because it's hidden. For 90% of the time, Lois appears completely normal and rational. This makes her breaks with sanity more shocking and unpredictable. You never know when the dam will burst. It's comprehensive. When Lois snaps, she doesn't just lose control in one area. She becomes a criminal, a fugitive, a potential cheater, a narcissist. Her breakdowns are total personality transformations. It's driven by suppression. Lois spends so much time being the responsible one, managing everyone else's problems, that her own needs get buried. When they finally emerge, they come out as full-blown criminal behavior or moral boundary crossing. It affects everyone. When Lois breaks bad, the entire family suffers. Without her stability, they fall apart. Her crazy has consequences for everyone around her. She's self-aware enough to feel guilty. Unlike truly insane characters, Lois knows when she's wrong. She feels the weight of her actions, but this doesn't stop her from doing them again when pushed. Comparing Lois to other characters versus Peter. Peter is constantly crazy in small, stupid ways. Lois is mostly sane but occasionally crazy in big, dangerous ways. Peter's chaos is background noise. Lois's chaos is an earthquake versus Meg. Meg snaps due to external abuse. Lois snaps due to internal pressure she puts on herself. Meg is reactive crazy. Lois is pressure cooker crazy versus Brian. Brian's problems are about ego and delusion. Lois's problems are about suppressed needs and desires. Brian lies to himself. Lois lies to everyone, including herself, about how okay she is. Versus Stewie. Stewie is openly villainous and plots evil. Lois is secretly damaged and occasionally breaks. Stewie's crazy is constant and honest. Lois's crazy is episodic and hidden. Versus Carter. Carter is evil by choice and philosophy. Lois becomes temporarily crazy when her coping mechanisms fail. Carter chose to be a monster. Circumstances made Lois one temporarily. Lois Griffin ranks high on the Family Guy crazy scale. Not because she's always insane, but because her breaks with sanity are so complete and unpredictable. She's the character who proves that being the normal one in a crazy family is its own form of madness. She steals compulsively. She nearly cheats with the family dog. She becomes vain and self-absorbed when given attention. She makes controversial life choices that shock even her family. And through it all, she's trying desperately to hold everything together while slowly falling apart herself. Lois isn't crazy like Stewie, who's crazy all the time. She's not crazy like Peter, who's too stupid to know better. She's crazy like a person who's been pushed beyond their breaking point and doesn't know how to come back. The most frightening thing about Lois? She always does come back. She returns to being the responsible wife and mother, which means the pressure starts building again, which means another breakdown is inevitable. Lois Griffin, the ticking time bomb living in plain sight. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Peter Griffin. Peter Griffin, the king of chaos. Peter Griffin is the head of the Griffin family and the main character of Family Guy. He's not the craziest character on the show in terms of being genuinely insane, but he might be the most dangerous because his stupidity, combined with complete lack of consequences, creates constant disasters. These episodes show Peter at his worst, committing crimes, destroying property, endangering his family, and learning absolutely nothing from any of it. Who is Peter Griffin? Peter is a middle-aged man who works at a brewery in Quahog, Rhode Island. He's married to Lois, has 3 children, Meg, Chris, and Stewie, and owns a talking dog named Brian. Peter is severely unintelligent, impulsive, selfish, and lacks any ability to learn from mistakes or consider consequences before acting. Unlike Chris, who is just dumb, Peter's stupidity is weaponized by his adult agency and resources. He has a job, money, a car, and the freedom to cause massive damage. His crazy isn't malicious like Carter's or calculated like Stewie's. Peter is a chaos engine. Everywhere he goes, destruction follows. Death has a shadow. The welfare fraud. The pilot episode establishes Peter's core character traits perfectly. It starts with him getting drunk at a stag party despite promising Lois he wouldn't drink. At the party, Peter and his friends play Drink the Beer, a game where you drink beer and win more beer. Peter gets so drunk he tries to make the Statue of Liberty attractive by drinking until she's hot. The next morning, the family eats breakfast on top of Peter's unconscious body on the kitchen table. When Lois's chair collapses because Stewie loosened it trying to kill her, Peter barely notices. Peter goes to work hungover and falls asleep at his job at the happy-go-lucky toy factory. His job is watching for dangerous toys on the conveyor belt. While he sleeps, innocent toys get replaced with knives, power sockets, tanks of gasoline, and other lethal items. Children get hurt, and Peter gets fired. Peter's response to losing his job shows his complete lack of responsibility. He tells Chris, "Way to go, Dad. Fight the machine." Chris responds enthusiastically, "Way to go, Dad. Fight the machine," showing that Chris has inherited Peter's inability to grasp reality. When Stewie asks, "How do you know about the machine?" It's one of the few moments where Stewie breaks his usual pattern of ignoring the family. Peter tries various jobs, including being a sneeze guard at a salad bar where he points a gun at an old lady about to sneeze and says, "Take it outside, lady." This shows Peter's solution to every problem involves threats or violence. Then Peter discovers welfare. He goes to collect his check and receives $150,000 per week due to a computer error. Any reasonable person would report this mistake. Peter decides to keep it. Peter's response when Brian suggests calling the welfare office. "Well, not necessarily. Maybe I'm like their 1 millionth customer." This is classic Peter logic, inventing an absurd explanation rather than accepting obvious truth. Peter uses the money to buy ridiculous things, including the statue of David. When the statue arrives, Peter admits, "The penis broke off when I packed it into the car," Brian notes. "Yeah, well, that's a bad part anyway," and Peter throws the stone penis, which crashes into Quagmire's house. Quagmire finds it and says, "Shoot, these things are lucky," thinking it's a horseshoe. Lois gets angry and says, "I am so mad I can't see straight." Peter's solution: "Oh, no problem. We got the money to get that fixed with enough left over for us to buy our way out of any trouble our kids might get into, just like the Kennedys." Eventually, Peter gets caught and goes to court. He gives an apology that seems genuine. I feel really bad about what I did. I don't know. I just saw one chance I'd ever have to give my family the things they deserve. I guess I screwed it up. I cheated the government. And worst of all, I lied to my wife, and she deserves better. I'm sorry, honey. The judge sentences him to 24 months in prison. The whole family says, "Oh no," in sequence. Then the Kool-Aid guy crashes through the wall, yelling, "Oh yeah." This becomes a running gag throughout the series. Stewie tries his mind control device on the judge. It doesn't work, but the judge is charmed by baby Stewie and lets Peter go free with his job back. Peter immediately starts planning his next scam. First a minority scholarship, then a sexual harassment suit, then a disability claim, where he knocks himself unconscious with a baseball bat. This episode establishes that Peter never learns. He faces consequences, apologizes, gets released, and immediately plans the next scheme. His stupidity isn't innocent, it's willfully destructive. Petarded, discovering he's mentally challenged. Petarded takes Peter's stupidity and makes it official. The episode starts with Peter winning a game of Trivial Pursuit and becoming unbearably smug. He starts using the phrase shallow and pedantic to sound smart, even using it to insult Lois's meatloaf at dinner. Lois asks, "Everything all right, Peter?" He responds, "Well, Lois, since you ask, I find this meatloaf rather shallow and pedantic." Brian calls him out. "What is this? You're gonna talk down to everyone just because you won a game of Trivial Pursuit?" Peter smugly says, "Perhaps." Brian asks Lois, "Do you ever stop and think, wow, I'm married to that guy?" Lois admits, "No, I usually just repress it." Brian asks if that's healthy, and Lois says, "What's the worst that could happen?" Cut to a tumor in Lois's head singing in Peter's voice, I'm a tumor, to an upbeat tune. Peter's smugness leads him to take an IQ test to prove he's a genius. The results come back showing Peter is technically mentally retarded. The episode uses this outdated term, which was medical terminology at the time but is now recognized as offensive. Peter's first response is to call his high school girlfriend Sally. "Hello, Sally. Hey, it's Peter Griffin." "Yeah, that's right, senior prom." "Yeah, it's been a while. So, listen, I just found out that I'm retarded, and I'm just calling to let you know that you might want to get yourself tested." Peter then goes to Joe and says, "Well, I took this test and, it sort of turns out that I'm technically mentally retarded. And, I just wanted to ask, how do you deal with it?" Joe responds, "Deal with what?" Peter says, with being retarded. Joe clarifies, "Peter, I'm not retarded, I'm handicapped." Peter dismisses this. "Oh, well, now you're just splitting hairs." This scene shows Peter's complete lack of social awareness. He can't distinguish between different disabilities and doesn't understand why comparing them might be offensive. Peter starts using his diagnosis to get special treatment. He gets a disability card and goes to a restaurant where he announces through a microphone, "Attention all restaurant customers. Testicles. That is all." When Lois tries to stop him, she grabs the microphone and hears herself. "Oh my God, is that my voice? God, it's all whiny and nasally and Peter also tries to get disability money from the government. When Agent Jessup says, "Mr. Griffin, this isn't going to work," Cleveland adds, "Yeah, Peter, you and 5 of those prostitutes get out of my house." This reveals Peter brought prostitutes to Cleveland's house as part of some scheme. The episode shows Lois testing Peter with simple questions. She asks, "What color is a fire truck?" Peter's thought process, oh God, I always get these. Okay. Alright. Fire truck, fire truck, fire truck, fire truck, fire truck. What color are those red fire trucks? Oh God, I can picture them now. All red and everything. He can visualize a red fire truck, but can't name the color red. Brian initially gloats about being right that Peter isn't a genius, screaming, ch in your fucking face, fuckwad, then immediately apologizing for his outburst. Meg complains about being embarrassed, and Stewie delivers a brutal response. "Oh yes, Meg, yes. Everything was going swimmingly for you until this. Yes, this is the thing that will ruin your reputation. Not your years of grotesque appearance or awkward social graces, or that Felix Ungarish way you clear your sinuses. No, it's this. Do you hear yourself talk? I might kill you tonight. Peter's diagnosis leads to him losing custody of his children. At one point, the family plays Black History Monopoly, and Peter reads a card. For whistling at a white woman, go directly to jail. Aw, man, doesn't anyone ever win at this game. Cleveland responds sadly, you don't win, you just do a little better each time. Eventually, Peter gets into a Bible fight, which becomes a running gag. The episode shows Peter's dangerous combination, amen. He's stupid enough to cause disasters, but functional enough to operate in society. This makes him more dangerous than Chris, who is stupid but powerless. PTV, fighting censorship. PTV shows Peter at his most defiant and childish. The episode starts with Peter and Lois having rough sex. She tackles him to the floor and forces him to play while he cries. She yells, "Say you like eating red carpet, tough guy." And Peter sobs, "I like eating red carpet." Quagmire hears this from outside, faints, but still manages to moan, "Giggity." After this scene, the FCC censors follow Peter everywhere. Even in his own home, his cursing gets bleeped by air horns. "Oh, Lois, you are so full of beep." What? Now, I can't say beep in my own beep-ing house. Beep in great, Lois. Just beep in great. You know, you're lucky you're good at beep my beep, or I'd never put up with ya. The censored rant continues with increasingly absurd bleeps. You know what I'm talking about. When you beep lubed up beep toothpaste in my beep, while you beep on a cherry, beep Episcopalian beep. Extension cord beep wetness, beep with a parking ticket. That is the best. This scene works because the bleeps make it sound much worse than whatever Peter actually said. The randomness of words like Episcopalian and parking ticket suggests Peter is just saying nonsense and the censors are bleeping random words. Peter rebels by creating his own TV station called PTV. He hosts shows including Douchebags, where he says, "Hey PTV fans, welcome to Douchebags. We're out here on the I-95 overpass doing our first segment. I dare you to crap off of that." Basically, we'll spend the day crapping off things that others have dared us to crap off. Cleveland admits, "I dared him." When Peter starts literally defecating off a highway overpass, Stewie notices and asks, "I say, are those two pigs vomiting up there?" Showing even Stewie is disturbed by Peter's behavior. Quagmire gets his own show, Midnight Q, where he announces, "Tonight, we're gonna enjoy the smooth jazz of Charlie Mingus. Norman Mailer is here to read an excerpt from his latest book, and then, we also have a girl from Omaha who's hiding a banana. We'll find out where. Giggity giggity, giggity goo. Stick around." The episode features Peter as a babysitter who leaves a child in a bathtub full of water with a blow dryer, medicine bottles as rattles, Drano in case there's a clog, and says towels are on the roof before leaving. This scene is played for dark comedy but shows Peter would absolutely kill a child through negligence. Peter insults Sarah Jessica Parker by saying, "What the hell? They let Sarah Jessica Parker on TV, and she looks like a foot." This becomes one of the show's most famous insults. The FCC eventually tells Peter, "Until you and all of Quahog start to clean up your act, they'll keep censoring everything." The episode ends with Peter defeating censorship through the power of crude humor and free speech, learning nothing about responsibility. Lottery fever, winning and losing millions. Lottery fever shows what happens when Peter gets unlimited money and zero supervision. The episode starts with Peter asking Lois for $28,000 to open a sushi restaurant. When she asks what he knows about sushi, he admits, "I don't care about the sushi. I just want to yell at customers when they walk in the door." A cutaway shows Peter behind a sushi counter, screaming, "Inashamashe, hajimimashite, here comes a black gooey." This is Peter's understanding of Japanese culture, racist nonsense words and pointing out black customers. When lottery fever hits Quahog, Mayor Adam West says if he wins, he'll finally splurge and buy myself one of those fancy four-piece suits. A cutaway shows him at a country club wearing a suit jacket, shirt, and tie on his head as the fourth piece, while asking to join. Brian tries to stop Peter from buying lottery tickets, saying, "Peter, this is idiotic. Your odds of winning are like 100 million to 1. Don't you know the lottery is just a tax on stupid people? Peter responds. Would you be saying that if the prize was 150 bags of the neighbor's garbage? Brian starts to argue but gets confused. But it's not. I mean, is it? That's an unrealistic, unfair question. When they're about to check the numbers, Lois says, when we lose, I'm getting a divorce. Peter calmly responds, understood. This shows Lois is at her breaking point with Peter's stupidity. They win. Peter immediately says, yes, we won the lottery. I'm gonna get me a penis butler. A butler suddenly appears saying, sir, and Peter commands, buttle my penis. Buttle it. This joke encapsulates Peter. Given unlimited resources, his first thought is something crude and stupid. Carter calls Lois asking, did ya blow all your money yet? When she says no, he responds, all right, call me when you blow all your money. Love ya. Bye. Carter knows Peter will waste everything. Peter quits his job, telling Angela, I just want to thank you for several extremely pleasurable years working for this corporation. Certain unexpected developments have created a situation where I am no longer in need of employment. I would be remiss, however, if I did not extend my gratitude to you for your unwavering fairness and belief in me, and there is a giant poo on your desk. This scene shows Peter at his most polite right before revealing he's left feces on his boss's desk. It's the perfect combination of trying to be civilized while being fundamentally crude. Peter buys a giant room filled with gold coins, planning to dive into it like Scrooge McDuck. A cutaway shows Peter diving into the coins and screaming, AAAAGH, it's not a liquid. It's a great many pieces of solid matter that form a hard, floor-like surface. Triple AGGHH. He's bleeding profusely, having learned that cartoons don't reflect reality. Within 1 month, the Griffins are completely broke and sitting on a curb in rags. Lois says, I can't believe it. We lost everything. Peter's solution. Well, seems like our only hope is the lottery. 1 month later, they're in the same spot, even more ragged. Peter realizes, holy shit, we won twice, and we're right back here again. They won the lottery twice, got $150 million twice, and lost it all twice. Peter tries to find a bright side. Yeah, but on the bright side, if this hadn't happened, we never would have met Kyle. They greet a random homeless guy on the street. Peter then admits, and that's not even Kyle. They don't even know the man's name. They're just so desperate they're trying to find positives in random strangers. Screwed the Pooch. More inappropriate behavior. Screwed the Pooch shows Peter dealing with Carter Pewterschmidt. When Peter tries to impress Carter by speaking French, Carter asks, did Peter have a stroke? Lois explains, no, Daddy. Peter's cultured himself, like Julia Roberts, in Pretty Woman. Carter responds, oh, so I should treat him like a high-class whore. He then lights a cigarette, takes one puff, and extinguishes it on Peter's chest. Peter winces, but says, that's fine, just no kissing on the lips. This scene establishes the Peter-Carter dynamic. Carter treats Peter like garbage, and Peter accepts it because he's desperate for approval. The episode features Peter making bets he can't afford to lose. He tells someone, I will give you all my Star Wars guys if it is. Whoa, 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 wait. Except Boba Fett. No matter how sure I am, I never risk the Fett man. This shows Peter's priorities. He'll risk his family's well-being, but never his Boba Fett action figure. A scene shows Michael Eisner and Bill Gates flying on jetpacks. Michael says, the people look like ants from up here. Bill Gates responds, they are ants, Michael. They are ants. This represents the wealthy elite's view of normal people like Peter. They're insects. Peter admits to Brian that he's been banned from video stores for taping over their movies. A cutaway shows Citizen Kane playing with Charles Kane saying Rosebud before Peter appears on screen saying it's his sled. It was his sled from when he was a kid. There, I just saved you 2 long boobless hours. This joke shows Peter's complete lack of cultural appreciation. He can't understand why anyone would watch a boobless movie for 2 hours when he could just spoil the ending in 10 seconds. Why Peter is dangerous. Peter Griffin ranks high on the crazy scale because he causes massive collateral damage. Every Peter scheme results in property destruction, injuries, financial ruin, or worse. Children get hurt by dangerous toys. The government loses millions. His family goes homeless twice. He never learns. Other characters grow and change. Peter ends every episode planning his next disaster. The tumor in Lois's head represents the psychological damage of living with Peter. He has no moral compass. Peter will commit welfare fraud, leave children in danger, create obscene television, defecate in public, and assault people without hesitation. He's functional enough to be dangerous. Unlike Chris, who is too stupid to cause real harm, Peter has a job, money, transportation, and social connections. He weaponizes his stupidity. He's selfish to the core. Every decision Peter makes prioritizes his immediate desires over everyone else's well-being, including his own children. Peter Griffin represents the most dangerous type of crazy, operational insanity. He's not insane enough to be institutionalized, but not sane enough to function responsibly. He's a walking disaster with a driver's license, bank account, and voting rights. Peter isn't the smartest, strongest, or most evil character, but he might be the most destructive because his chaos is constant, his stupidity is weaponized, and his inability to learn means every disaster just leads to the next one. In a show full of genuinely insane characters, Peter stands out as proof that you don't need to be clinically crazy to cause catastrophic damage. You just need to be really, really dumb and completely lacking in self-awareness. Peter Griffin. Too stupid to know he's dangerous, too functional to be stopped. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Glenn Quagmire. Glenn Quagmire, the sex addict nobody stops. Glenn Quagmire is Peter's neighbor and one of his closest friends. He's a commercial airline pilot known for his catchphrase, giggity, and his obsessive pursuit of sex. While other characters have specific episodes where they act crazy, Quagmire's sexual compulsion is his defining trait throughout the entire series. These episodes show that what starts as comedy about a horny neighbor actually reveals a man with serious sexual dysfunction that frequently crosses into criminal behavior. Who is Glenn Quagmire? Quagmire is a pilot who lives alone on Spooner Street in Quahog. He's friends with Peter, Joe, and Cleveland, spending most of his free time at the Drunken Clam Bar. Unlike Peter's stupidity or Brian's pretentiousness, Quagmire's character flaw is sexual addiction so severe it dominates every aspect of his life. Quagmire will have sex with anyone, anywhere, at any time. He doesn't discriminate based on age, as long as they're legal, appearance, or circumstance. His sex drive isn't portrayed as healthy male sexuality, maybe a CC. It's compulsive, obsessive, and often predatory. The show plays this for laughs, but examining specific episodes reveals behavior that would result in arrest and imprisonment in reality. Airport Sue, inappropriate behavior at work. Airport 07 shows Quagmire as a commercial airline pilot, giving him access to passengers and the authority of his position. The episode opens with Peter becoming obsessed with redneck culture after attending a comedy show. He drags Brian to watch Carl Sagan's Cosmos edited for rednecks, where scientific facts get replaced with hillbilly nonsense. But the real story involves Quagmire's behavior as a pilot. When he makes announcements to passengers, he can't help inserting sexual references. His pre-flight announcement includes, "The flight's gonna be a little longer than expected. We've got some very strong headwinds. Giggity." This seems harmless compared to what comes later. After landing, Quagmire makes another announcement. "We know your choice in airport sex, and we thank you for choosing Quagmire. Please exercise caution when standing up, as the contents in your vagina may have shifted during coitus." This announcement reveals Quagmire had sex with a passenger during the flight. As the pilot, while responsible for hundreds of lives, he abandoned the cockpit to have sex, then bragged about it over the intercom. The episode also shows Quagmire teaching Chris inappropriate things. They sit on the couch with a calculator. Quagmire instructs Chris to add numbers, then multiply, resulting in 8008, which looks like boob on a calculator. Chris gets excited. "Oh, boob." Quagmire celebrates. "Boob. Yeah. Alright, boob." Then Chris asks, "What if we had two calculators and we put them next to each other?" Quagmire gasps with excitement. Yes, find one, yes." He's teaching a child to create crude, sexual images using calculators. Earlier in the episode, Peter shows his redneck transformation by calling Meg over to the couch. He yawns and puts his arm around her. Meg's eyes widen in surprise as she realizes what's happening. She asks, "Dad, what are you doing?" Peter responds, "Meg, I'm a redneck, which means I am about to do something to you that you will not remember until you're 40. Meg jumps off the couch and runs away screaming. Peter chases her yelling, "Meg, come back here. I meant sex." This joke about incestual abuse is played for shock value, but it establishes that in Peter's redneck phase, he sees nothing wrong with sexually abusing his daughter. The episode features Tom Tucker reporting on a Flight 209 drama where recently discharged pilot Captain Glenn Quagmire is apparently talking the plane down. This suggests Quagmire got fired for his behavior, but they still need him to prevent a crash. When Lois answers the phone, someone asks for Longrod Van Huendong. She says there's no one by that name. Quagmire immediately jumps up, revealing it's his fake name for picking up women. Peter and Joe engage in their usual banter about whether Lois didn't say the name, showing they're all aware of Quagmire's constant sexual schemes. Quagmire's dad, the transgender revelation. Quagmire's dad deals with Quagmire's father Dan, a decorated war hero, coming out as transgender and transitioning to become Ida. The episode starts innocently with Peter helping Chris with French homework, teaching him that folk means seal. They go through increasingly crude combinations like sick folk, twisted folk, and cluster folk, ending with Ann Coulter as ugly folk and bitch. Dan Quagmire arrives for a visit and immediately displays stereotypically gay mannerisms. Quagmire is horrified, thinking his father is gay. He confronts Dan at a ball. "Are you gay, Dad?" Dan denies it. "No, Glenn, I'm not gay." Quagmire presses, "Just tell me the truth." Dan insists, "I am telling you the truth. Now, calm down, you're ruining this ball. You know how much I love balls." Quagmire responds, "Okay, that's not helping." Dan promises, "Son, you have my word. I'm not gay." After Quagmire accepts this, Dan adds, "But I am a woman trapped in a man's body, and while I'm in Quahog, I plan to have a sex change operation." Quagmire is stunned. "Oh, come on, just be gay." This line reveals Quagmire's prejudices. He'd prefer his father be gay rather than transgender, viewing the latter as worse. The Griffin family has dinner with Ida after her surgery. Peter asks bluntly, "Ida, do you miss your penis?" Lois snaps, "Peter," but Chris thanks him for asking it. The family is curious but uncomfortable. The episode's most significant plot involves Brian unknowingly having sex with Ida at a hotel. Later, Stewie reveals the truth about Dan's transition. Brian asks about the new name, expecting Danielle or Dana. Stewie says no Ida. Brian's eyes widen. He starts gagging and vomits profusely for 30 seconds. When he stops, he screams, "AAAARARARARARARARAHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHStewie is shocked. "What?" Brian explains. "I had sex with her at the Marriott." They both scream back and forth. Brian yells, "How did this happen? When they move to a new place, they're supposed to notify the neighborhood. That's how it works." This scene reveals Brian's transphobia, his horror at having consensual sex with a transgender woman. His reaction treats Ida's identity as something deceptive rather than valid. Meanwhile, Quagmire reconciles with Ida. They share a heartfelt father-son hug. But then Ida notices something. "Glenn?" Quagmire apologizes. "Oh, sorry. Damn thing can't tell the difference." He got an erection while hugging his own father. This isn't played as Quagmire being attracted to Ida specifically. It's his body automatically responding to any physical contact with a woman's body. His sex drive is so uncontrollable it activates during an emotional family moment. Ida then reveals she's dating someone. When she says his name is Brian, the camera cuts outside to Quagmire screaming, "No! Ooh!" Quagmire storms into the Griffin house, searching for Brian. He drags him from under a bed and punches and kicks Brian repeatedly through the house, while threatening, "If I ever see you anywhere near my house, I'll blow your head off. Now lay there and die, you piece of crap." As Quagmire leaves, Brian says, "Hey." Quagmire looks back. Brian delivers the final line, "I fucked your dad." This brutal beating shows Quagmire's violent side. He doesn't just threaten Brian, He follows through with sustained assault. His rage over his father dating Brian leads to attempted murder. Quagmire's Quagmire, kidnapped by a sex addict. Quagmire's Quagmire shows what happens when Quagmire meets someone whose sex drive matches his own. He meets Sonia at a computer repair shop after his computer gets fried. She sees his porn collection and they bond over shared interests. Their first date goes well until Quagmire wakes up handcuffed to a bed, discovering he was drugged. Instead of being horrified, he decides that he has finally found his true love. Quagmire sees being drugged and restrained for sex as romantic rather than criminal. They engage in increasingly extreme sexual acts. The transcript notes they have sex with his father, meaning either a threesome with Dan, divided by Ida, or some other disturbing scenario involving family members. At the Drunken Clam, Peter and Joe notice Quagmire, hiding blackened eyes, but he dismisses their concerns. Quagmire is being physically abused but refuses help because he's getting regular sex. When Quagmire leaves the bar, Sonia meets him outside, beats him, and shuts him in the trunk of his car, claiming that she is satisfying his fantasies of being dominated and humiliated as she drives away with him. As she locks him in the trunk, Sonia says darkly, "Oh, I'm gonna clean out your trunk. Giggity." Quagmire protests, "That's my word. That's my word." Even while being kidnapped and beaten, Quagmire is upset she's appropriating his catchphrase. Ida, Quagmire's father, shows up at Peter's door, expressing concern that Quagmire hasn't been seen for days. Joe confirms he hasn't appeared for their regular activities. At the Clam, Joe mentions, "He never showed this morning, and today's the day we usually go apple picking." A cutaway shows Joe in a wheelchair at an apple orchard, directing Quagmire. "Get that one. Get that one. Hey, get that one. Get that one over there. No, not that one." Quagmire protests, "I already got it. I can't put it back." Joe responds, "Well, it's not going in the pie." Quagmire gets frustrated. "Well, if you're so smart, why don't you come up here and pick them yourself?" Joe snaps, now there's no pie at all." This cutaway shows Joe taking advantage of Quagmire's friendship, making him do physical labor while Joe supervises from his wheelchair, then getting angry when Quagmire picks the wrong apples. Peter, Joe, and Ida search for Quagmire throughout Quahog's seedy areas. When they pound on a storage unit door, muffled sounds come from inside. Peter interprets this as, "Oh, he's eating. We'll come back when you're done eating." He completely misreads the situation. Quagmire is bound and gagged, not having a meal. They find the right container, and Sonia appears with Joe's gun. Joe reveals he keeps his gun unloaded following an incident the previous April. He calls her bluff and tackles her. Quagmire is freed, but admits later that he'll need to be the really kinky one in his future relationships. This ending shows Quagmire learned nothing. He wasn't traumatized by being kidnapped, beaten, and held prisoner. Instead, he wants his next relationship to be even more extreme. His sex addiction is so severe that criminal abuse registers as exciting rather than dangerous. Quagmire's mom, statutory rape. Quagmire's mom deals with the darkest aspect of Quagmire's sexuality, his willingness to have sex with anyone regardless of legality. After sex with a woman named Kira, she reveals, "You said you were 23. Quagmire protests, "You said you were 23. Kira responds, "Yeah, and you said you love me." Quagmire admits, "Well, I guess you got me there." Quagmire gets charged with statutory rape and goes to court. The judge sentences him to 20 years in prison. Everyone gasps. Then a female voice announces, "Oh no, you don't." An elderly woman appears. Quagmire says, "Mom," and every man in the courtroom responds, "Crystal?" This joke implies Quagmire's mother, Crystal, has had sex with every male in the courtroom, including the judge, jury, lawyers, and spectators. Quagmire inherited his sex addiction from his mother. Peter visits Quagmire before sentencing and says, "Don't think of it as 20 years. Think of it as 2 10-year-olds, you sick freak." This horrible joke equates 20 years in prison with sex with 20-year-olds, then suggests substituting 2 10-year-old children. Even as a joke about Quagmire going to prison for statutory rape, the punchline involves joking about child abuse. At the hearing, Peter defends Quagmire by citing Game of Thrones. According to Game of Thrones, if the girl has had her blood, she is good to go. Has the girl had her blood? Answer the question. The judge notes, Mr. Griffin, she was underage. Peter then argues, yes, however, Mr. Quagmire was born on February 29th. Ergo, he's only 12. Ergo, the girl raped him. This absurd logic claims Quagmire is technically 12 years old because he was born on Leap Day, making the underage girl the rapist. The episode shows Peter carrying 3 handguns into the courthouse with metal detectors picking up nothing, suggesting security incompetence. Chris yells, "Where is your daughter? Show her to us," wanting to see the victim, which is deeply inappropriate. Crystal uses her influence to get Quagmire's sentence commuted. Peter celebrates. Quagmire got away with it and learned nothing. That's great. This line explicitly acknowledges that Quagmire faced no real consequences and will continue his behavior. Why Quagmire's crazy is different. Quagmire occupies a unique position in the Family Guy crazy rankings. His crazy is his only trait. Unlike multidimensional characters, Quagmire exists primarily as the sex guy. Remove his sex addiction and there's almost no character left. It's actually a crime. Stewie's murder plots are fantasy. Peter's schemes are stupid. Quagmire commits actual sex crimes, statutory rape, public indecency, sexual harassment, abandoning his pilot duties for sex. Nobody stops him. Peter gets arrested and faces consequences. Meg goes to prison. Lois gets caught. Quagmire gets caught having sex with a minor, and his sentence gets commuted because his mother had sex with the courtroom. He's functional despite addiction. Quagmire maintains a career as a pilot despite behavior that should disqualify him. He owns a home, has friends, and participates in society while being an active sex addict. The show treats it as comedy. Quagmire's sex addiction gets played for laughs, rather than portrayed as the serious disorder it represents. His giggity catchphrase makes sexual obsession seem cute rather than disturbing. Quagmire ranks high on the Family Guy crazy scale because his insanity is criminal, compulsive, and completely unchecked. He commits statutory rape and gets away with it. He abandons an airplane full of passengers to have sex. He gets kidnapped and beaten by another sex addict and wants more. Most importantly, Quagmire never faces lasting consequences. He never seeks treatment. His friends enable rather than confront his behavior. The show presents sexual addiction as quirky personality rather than destructive mental illness. In a show full of crazy characters, Quagmire is one of the few whose crazy would result in prison time and sex offender registration in reality. His sex addiction isn't just unhealthy, it's criminal. And unlike other characters who face consequences for their actions, Quagmire always gets away with it. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to perhaps the craziest character of them all, Stewie Griffin. Stewie Griffin, the baby genius with murder on his mind. Stewie Griffin is perhaps the most complex and genuinely insane character in Family Guy. He's a 1-year-old baby with the vocabulary of a British aristocrat, the intelligence of a super genius, and an obsession with killing his mother Lois. While other characters are crazy in specific ways, Peter's stupid, Quagmire's a sex addict, Carter's evil, Stewie combines multiple forms of insanity into one diaper-wearing package. These episodes reveal the layers of Stewie's madness and the carefully constructed persona hiding his true self. Who is Stewie Griffin? Stewie is the youngest Griffin child, technically still a baby, despite being able to walk, talk, and build complex weapons and time machines. Most people in his world can't understand him or treat his words as baby babbling, though this inconsistency varies by episode. Brian, the family dog, always understands Stewie perfectly and serves as his reluctant partner in various schemes. Stewie speaks with an affected British accent, despite being born in Rhode Island to American parents. He's obsessed with world domination, building weapons of mass destruction, and most importantly, matricide, killing his mother, Lois. Yet underneath all this villainy lies deep insecurity, loneliness, and confusion about his own identity. Unlike other Family Guy characters whose crazy is simple and one-dimensional, Stewie's insanity operates on multiple levels simultaneously. He's a baby experiencing normal developmental stages, like learning shapes and laughing at his own feet. He's also a genius capable of building time machines and understanding quantum physics. He's a would-be world conqueror plotting humanity's downfall. and he's a lonely child desperately seeking connection while pushing everyone away. This combination makes Stewie unique in television. He represents what happens when brilliant intelligence develops without emotional maturity, when power exists without wisdom, when isolation becomes identity. Chitty Chitty, Death Bang, the first birthday threat. The very first season establishes Stewie's core insanity. The episode opens with Stewie's birth, where he emerges from the womb fully conscious and angry. The doctor asks Peter, "Would you like to have a look?" Peter responds, "Yeah, I've never seen a live baby being. Oh God," suggesting something disturbing about newborn Stewie. Immediately after birth, Stewie declares, "I say, am I to spend the entire day wallowing around in my own feces? A little service here." He claps twice, demanding attention. This baby is already speaking in complete sentences with a British accent and treating his parents like servants. This opening scene is crucial because it establishes that Stewie's madness isn't learned or developed, it's innate. He emerged from the womb already fully formed mentally, already speaking, already angry at the world. Most babies cry. Stewie complains about service quality. The main plot involves Stewie's first birthday party. But Stewie doesn't want a party, he's terrified of it. A man in white named Henry appears, apparently sent to collect Stewie. When Henry escorts Stewie away, Stewie tries to bribe him. "What are they paying you? I'll double it. I'll give you whatever you want. Money, women, men." This line reveals several things. First, Stewie has access to money somehow. Second, he's offering sexual favors as bribes. 7. Women or men, whatever Henry prefers. Third, he's desperate enough to offer anything to avoid his fate. A 1-year-old offering prostitutes as payment shows how disconnected Stewie is from normal childhood development. The episode features Brian commenting on Peter's parenting. "Bravo, Peter. You are the Spalding Gray of crap." This establishes Brian's role as the family's intellectual and critic, setting up his future dynamic with Stewie. Peter describes himself accurately. "Face it, Brian. I'm a bad father, a lousy husband, and a snappy dresser." This self-awareness is rare for Peter, who usually lacks any insight into his failings. Chris demonstrates his own stupidity at an arcade. "It's cool, Dad. They have this game where you put in $1 and you win 4 quarters. I win every time." Peter, recognizing the teaching moment, says, "Chris, this is a big day for you, the day you become the man of the house, because when we get home, your mother is going to kill me." This joke about domestic violence is typical Family Guy humor, but it also establishes the family's dysfunction. Peter knows Lois will be furious, and he's using Chris as a shield. Meg gets involved with a cult called The Cult that's planning mass suicide. At their gathering, when Meg says she's embarrassed she could die, a cult member responds, Hey, not before the rest of us." The cult plans to fake their deaths to avoid Meg's party, leading Peter to observe, "Sorry, Meg. I guess that's another bunch of people who'd rather fake their own death than go to a party with you." This brutal treatment of Meg is consistent throughout the series. Even a suicide cult finds her too unpleasant to tolerate. Meg's response, "I can't believe you'd put your family over your own daughter," shows her desperation for acceptance even from people planning to die. Brian delivers another harsh line about Meg. "She's a whiny little runt, isn't she?" When Lois gasps, he clarifies, "I said runt." This joke suggests Brian almost said something much worse, possibly the word that rhymes with runt. The episode ends with Stewie declaring, "Victory is mine," after surviving his first birthday. This becomes one of his catchphrases throughout the series. The threat represented by the man in white is never fully explained, but it establishes that Stewie has enemies and fears from birth. The cake subplot features Peter buying an erotic cake that turns out to have a naked man on it. When Lois points this out, Peter admits, "Well, there were only 2 left, and trust me, you did not want the one of Al Roker with the Hershey Kiss nipples." This crude joke fits the show's humor, but also shows Peter's complete lack of judgment. When Stewie sees the naked man on the cake, he announces, "It's a boy." This clever joke plays on the phrase used at births while also describing the cake's decoration. Lois responds, "Yes, and this cake is yours too," suggesting Stewie should enjoy his weird birthday cake. The hand that rocks the wheelchair. Evil Stewie returns. This later season episode deals with Stewie creating an evil clone of himself. The plot starts when Bonnie asks Lois to have Meg look after Joe and baby Susie while she's away. Quagmire interrupts their conversation and go have sex with Quagmire. Both women snap. Quagmire, and he responds, "Shucks, you can't blame a guy for trying. Giggity giggity giggity." Lois manipulates Meg into agreeing by claiming Bonnie said Meg is very pretty. When Meg questions how this came up, Lois explains, "Oh, we were talking about pretty people. And I said, Rachel Maddow. And she kind of took the baton from there and said, Meg Griffin." Meg asks who Rachel Maddow is, and Lois lies, "A model." This manipulation shows how the family treats Meg, but also demonstrates Stewie isn't the only Griffin capable of deception. Lois casually lies to her daughter to avoid having to do a favor herself. The joke about Rachel Maddow, a news anchor, not a model, works because Meg is so isolated she doesn't know basic pop culture figures. The main plot involves Stewie at the beach, where he's built an exact replica of the Raytheon executive headquarters in El Segundo, California. He brags to Brian, "Look at your fucking face. I hope you like egg, my friend." This shows Stewie's pride in his technical abilities. The reference to Raytheon, a real defense contractor, suggests Stewie has been studying weapons manufacturers. His sandcastle isn't of Disney's castle or a generic fortress. It's a specific corporate building associated with missile systems. This detail reveals how Stewie's mind works. Even his beach activities involve military-industrial complex research. A bully kicks over Stewie's sand creation and laughs mockingly. Stewie tries to assemble a rifle to shoot him but fumbles, and the rifle falls to pieces as the boy walks away laughing at Stewie. Brian observes, "Wow, never seen that happen before." This failure is significant. Stewie's defining trait is his competence with weapons and technology. Watching him fumble basic assembly shows something is wrong. Brian notices immediately because Stewie never fails at violence. Brian suggests Stewie is going soft and losing his edge. He points out, when was the last time you tried to blow something up or take over the world, or even use the phrase, "damn you"? Stewie defends himself. "Hey, I got a lot on my plate, man. I'm learning to use the toilet. I'm learning what shapes are. I spent half an hour laughing at my own feet yesterday." Then he starts laughing again. "Look, Brian, look at them." His feet distract him from the serious conversation. This scene reveals Stewie's internal conflict. He wants to be an evil genius, but he's still developmentally a toddler. He gets distracted by his own feet. His attention span can't maintain focus on villainy. Potty training and shape recognition occupy mental space that should be devoted to world domination. The contrast is jarring and sad. Stewie builds replica corporate headquarters and time machines, but he also needs to learn what a triangle is. His genius can't overcome his developmental stage. He's trapped between baby and supervillain with no middle ground. To prove he's still evil, Stewie creates a clone of himself. But something goes wrong, and the clone becomes Evil Stewie, even more murderous and focused than the original. Evil Stewie hunts Brian through Quahog, while regular Stewie realizes he's created something he can't control. This plot mirrors classic science fiction stories about creators destroyed by their creations. But here, Stewie's creation is literally himself, his own evil potential given physical form. Evil Stewie represents what regular Stewie could be without the distraction of feet and shapes, without the remnants of childhood innocence. The climax features Brian tied to a flagpole as bait. Evil Stewie appears with a laser gun. Brian tries reverse psychology. "Hey, well, you're doing me a favor. I've had enough. I can't live with that stupid family anymore. Do me a favor and end it all for me, will you?" Evil Stewie agrees, delighted to oblige Brian. Just as he's about to fire, regular Stewie tackles him. The two Stewies fight it out, losing their clothes in the process, while Brian escapes and grabs the gun. Now Brian faces two identical naked Stewies, both claiming to be the real one. This becomes a classic trope, identifying the real person versus the imposter. Brian solves this by saying, "Look at your feet." Regular Stewie just glances down. Why? They're just feet. But Evil Stewie giggles. What are they doing down there? They're like leg hands. Brian shoots Evil Stewie, recognizing that only regular Stewie would be distracted and delighted by his own feet. This brilliant solution uses Stewie's childishness to identify him. His weakness, being easily distracted by baby things, becomes his salvation. The version of Stewie who's completely focused on murder is the evil one. The version who laughs at his feet is the real one. This resolution suggests that Stewie's humanity lies in his developmental limitations. His baby traits aren't weaknesses to overcome, they're what make him Stewie, instead of a pure monster. Evil Stewie is what happens when you remove childhood from the genius baby. Regular Stewie is what happens when genius and infancy coexist. The episode features several disturbing subplots. Meg develops feelings for Joe and tries to seduce him, wearing sexy outfits and making advances. At one point she says, "We haven't made love in 2 weeks," and Joe responds, "We haven't made love ever." This inappropriate storyline shows Meg's desperation for any male attention. She pursues a married paraplegic neighbor twice her age because he's nice to her. When Joe asks about her outfit, she explains, "Oh, nothing. I just wanted to look sexy for Susie," lying about dressing up for a baby to hide her real target. Later, Meg tells Joe, "Sometimes it's really hard being me, so I guess I just make Meg a nade." Joe responds, "That sounds disgusting." This exchange plays on lemonade, while also suggesting Meg has created something unpleasant from her unpleasant situation. Baby Susie appears with thought captions from Patrick Stewart. "This is Patrick Stewart. How are you liking the program so far?" This meta joke breaks the fourth wall while also providing celebrity cameo. The Big Bang Theory, time travel chaos. The Big Bang Theory showcases Stewie's scientific genius and his toxic relationship with his half-brother Bertram. Stewie and Brian accidentally transport themselves outside the space-time continuum, a blank white void where nothing exists. Brian panics. "What happened? Where are we?" Stewie explains, "Well, the only explanation is we've somehow transported outside the space-time continuum." When Brian doesn't understand, Stewie clarifies, "Non-existence, no past, no future, no universe." This concept is genuinely frightening. They're not in space or another dimension, they're in absolute nothingness. The fact that they can still exist, breathe, and talk in non-existence defies physics, but Stewie seems unsurprised. His time machine malfunctioned so badly it transported them beyond reality itself. Despite being in non-existence, a large, brightly colored promo for the Cleveland show appears. Cleveland announces, "Hey, y'all, it's the Cleveland show." Stewie comments, "Huh, that's weird. Black guys usually don't promote themselves." This racist joke breaks the fourth wall while insulting both Cleveland and the spin-off show. The joke works on multiple levels. It mocks the Cleveland show for being a cynical spin-off. It suggests the show exists outside reality, implying it's so bad it's not real. And it has Stewie make a racist observation about self-promotion that's both offensive and pointless, typical of his character. Stewie calls Brian a slut when asking for help escaping non-existence. Brian responds by noting, "So that means you're Italian." Stewie has a revelation. "Of course, my love for SpaghettiOs and smoking on the toilet. It all makes sense." This exchange establishes Stewie's Italian heritage as explanation for crude behaviors. The joke about smoking on the toilet is particularly disgusting. It suggests Stewie, a baby, has this adult habit in the most unsanitary location possible. They eventually escape and travel back to Renaissance Italy, where they encounter Leonardo da Vinci. Bertram, Stewie's evil half-brother, appears planning to kill da Vinci and erase Stewie from existence. Leonardo asks, "Mamma mia, what is this?" And Bertram announces, "You're assassin. You, overrated caricaturist." Bertram's insult is clever. Da Vinci is considered one of history's greatest artists, but Bertram dismisses him as an overrated caricaturist, reducing the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper to cartoons. This shows Bertram shares Stewie's intelligence and condescension. Before Bertram can act, Stewie asks, "Hey, Bertram, what's your favorite kind of bottled water?" "Mine's Arrowhead." He then shoots an arrow into Bertram's head, killing him with a pun. Brian notes, "Wow, that was dramatic." This murder is typical Stewie, casual violence accompanied by wordplay. He kills his half-brother with the same emotional weight as ordering lunch. The pun makes it worse. Stewie is so detached from the act of killing that he turns it into a joke setup. In a subplot, Stewie claims to have injected Da Vinci's girlfriend, with his DNA to ensure his own existence. When Brian asks, "You had sex?" Stewie insists, "No, I put my DNA inside of her." Brian clarifies, "Right, you had sex." Stewie gets frustrated. "No, what are you not getting? I put a sample of my DNA in a syringe and I injected her on the staircase, on the couch, and on the balcony." This absurd explanation tries to avoid admitting baby Stewie had sex with an adult woman in Renaissance Italy. The joke works because Stewie describes exactly what happened, DNA, entering someone at multiple locations, while denying the obvious implication. His technical explanation can't disguise that he's describing sex. The multiple locations make it worse, suggesting repeated encounters throughout a building. Before dying, Bertram threatens, "You're about to be yesterday's hopscotch chalk on the sidewalk, Stewie. Erased." This poetic threat shows that even Stewie's enemies match his dramatic speaking style. Bertram inherited not just Stewie's intelligence, but his flair for elaborate metaphors. When Stewie returns home injured, Brian asks if he's okay. Stewie responds in a falsetto voice, "You gotta kiss him to wake him up." Brian refuses, "I'm not going to kiss you." Stewie, pretending to be unconscious, insists, "Stewie can't hear you. He's not awake. Only a kiss will wake him up." Brian threatens, "Well, I better get Meg." This is such a terrible threat that Stewie immediately wakes up. The prospect of Meg kissing him is worse than pretending to be unconscious. This joke reinforces both Meg's undesirability and Brian's cruel willingness to weaponize her against Stewie. Send in Stewie, please. The therapy session. This landmark episode is the longest and most revealing look at Stewie's psychology. After pushing a kid named Tyler down the stairs, Stewie gets sent to the school psychologist, Dr. Cecil Pritchfield. The entire episode is basically one long therapy session with no cutaway gags, unusual for Family Guy. Stewie starts with defensive small talk until Dr. Pritchfield claims to know Stewie a bit after brief observation. Stewie responds, "You do feel you know me a bit." Okay. All right. Well, that's fair. Might I? What follows is an epic monologue where Stewie deconstructs the doctor's entire life based on objects in his office. Looking at a vacation photo, Stewie deduces everything about Dr. Pritchfield's relationship with his younger husband Michael, and the 26-year age gap, how they met through Shakespeare recitations, Michael's lack of career, their financial struggles, the cheaper hotel they actually stayed at versus the expensive Fasano hotel where they went for drinks, Michael's wandering eye toward younger men, and Dr. Pritchfield's constant fear of abandonment. The monologue is devastatingly accurate and cruel. Stewie doesn't just observe facts, he weaponizes them. He describes Dr. Pritchfield feeling humiliated and unseen while younger men ignore him but flirt with Michael. He notes their Facebook photo is carefully staged to project success they don't have. He concludes, "And every time you glance at this picture, you wonder, how long before he leaves me?" After a long pause, Dr. Pritchfield responds simply, "You seem like a very lonely little boy." Stewie immediately breaks down. "Oh my God, I am. I'm so lonely. You can see inside my soul." This moment reveals everything. Stewie's intelligence and cruelty are defense mechanisms. He pushes people away before they can hurt him. His analysis of others is a weapon to maintain distance. But one simple observation about his loneliness bypasses all his defenses. The therapy session continues with Stewie discussing his British accent. Dr. Pritchfield fails to notice anything unusual about it, pronouncing controversy as controversy in his own British accent. When Stewie doesn't recognize this pronunciation, the doctor explains those of us with British accents pronounce it controversy. Stewie realizes the joke and snaps, "Piss off." This exchange suggests Stewie's accent is so natural to him and everyone around him that even another British person doesn't notice it as unusual. His fake accent has become his real voice. Regarding Tyler, Stewie confesses, "I only pushed Tyler down the stairs because I like him, and I'm afraid he won't like me back. And not like him, I'm not gay." He becomes defensive. "This whole thing isn't because I'm gay, so calm down. I can already see you licking your chops. I'm sure you live for the coming out sessions." Dr. Pritchfield tries to explore Stewie's sexuality. Stewie insists he's heterosexual but also identifies as fluid, something I hear being tossed around a lot now, and admits I've always been bi, openly. I just don't talk about it all that much. When the doctor points out this is technically coming out, Stewie yells, "Damn it." This exchange is both funny and sad. Stewie wants to claim he's been openly bisexual while also insisting he never talks about it. He wants credit for being out without actually coming out. His sexuality confuses him as much as it confuses viewers. The session reveals Stewie's other interests. He discusses his fling with world domination, treating attempted global conquest as a brief hobby. He mentions his fascination with musicals and has a tantrum about not being on Broadway, eventually singing Hamilton while fighting hiccups and snot bubbles. This scene shows Stewie's theatrical side. His evil genius persona includes musical theater aspirations. He's not just building death rays, he's dreaming of jazz hands and Tony Awards. His villainy has an artistic component. Dr. Pritchfield shares his own backstory about growing up in the London Blitz, losing his parents, and being passed around until ending up in an orphanage. Stewie interrupts, "Good God, how old are you?" The doctor's story is meant to show he understands being an outcast, but Stewie stops him mid-narrative. This interruption is telling. Stewie can't handle genuine emotional connection. When someone tries to relate to him through shared trauma, he deflects with an insult about age. He'd rather mock someone than accept empathy. The session's climax comes when Stewie admits, "Everything about me is this carefully constructed persona, designed to keep people at arm's length. This isn't even how I really talk. This is how I talk. The accent is nothing more than an affectation, a coat of armor to get me through the day, just an image I cultivated so I can feel special." He drops the British accent and speaks in a regular American voice. "This is my real voice. But doctor," Pritchfield says, "I don't hear a difference." Frustrated, Stewie impersonates multiple characters: Peter, Quagmire, Brian, Doctor, Hartman, Tom Tucker, Seamus, Carter, Ida, Jake Tucker, Jesus Christ, and even Roger Smith from American Dad, JBS, trying to prove his voice changes. The doctor still hears no difference. "I'm sorry, that just all sounds like the same person." This brilliant joke suggests Stewie's real voice might actually be the British one, or that his identity is so fractured he can't tell which voice is authentic. He claims to be dropping his persona, but everyone else hears the same voice. Either Stewie is delusional about his accent, or everyone around him is deaf to his changes. Stewie nearly decides to drop his persona and be a normal boy. He declares, "I'm gonna talk to Tyler. I'm gonna make friends. I'm gonna be a normal boy." But when Dr. Pritchfield responds, "You're finally going to be just like everybody else," Stewie recoils. He repeats, "Say that again." The doctor obliges, "You're finally going to be just like everybody else." Stewie's face changes, but I don't. I don't want to be like everybody else." He returns to his British accent and abandons the plan to change. This reversal is heartbreaking. Stewie desperately wants connection, but not at the cost of his uniqueness. Being special is more important than being happy. His isolation is painful, but also what defines him. Without his persona, he's just another kid. With it, he's extraordinary and alone. The episode ends darkly. Dr. Pritchfield begins having heart trouble during the session. His prescription medication sits on the desk, the same medication Stewie mentioned during his earlier monologue. The doctor reaches for it but can't access it in time. He looks at Stewie, silently pleading for help. Stewie watches him die without moving. He deliberately lets his therapist die rather than risk being understood. After Dr. Pritchfield collapses, Stewie justifies it. "Doctor, Pritchfield has seen through the facade, so he must die." Right after the doctor dies, Michael calls, leaving a message. "It's Michael. I want a divorce," Stewie comments. "This is not your day." This darkly comic moment confirms everything, Stewie deduced. Michael is leaving, and Dr. Pritchfield died without knowing his marriage was already over. That night, Brian sleeps with Stewie. Stewie admits, "I have done something awful," but doesn't elaborate. This confession suggests some part of Stewie feels guilt about letting Dr. Pritchfield die, but not enough guilt to confess or face consequences. Why Stewie is the craziest. Stewie Griffin tops the Family Guy crazy rankings because he's genuinely psychopathic. Unlike Peter's stupid chaos or Quagmire's sex addiction, Stewie plans and executes murder. He builds weapons. He lets his therapist die. His villainy is calculated and intentional. His intelligence makes him dangerous. Stewie builds time machines, cloning devices, and death rays. His genius, combined with his instability, creates existential threats. Other characters cause property damage. Stewie can alter timelines and erase people from existence. He's completely isolated. Stewie can't connect with others. His only friend is Brian, and even that relationship is dysfunctional. His loneliness drives his worst behavior. He murders his therapist rather than accept understanding. His identity is fractured. The fake accent, the unclear sexuality, the conflict between baby and genius. Dewey doesn't know who he is. This identity crisis manifests as world domination plots. His evil schemes are attempts to construct meaning from confusion. He'll never grow up. Unlike other characters who might mature, Stewie is trapped as a baby. His development is permanently stunted, meaning his issues can never resolve. He'll always be caught between infantile needs and adult ambitions. He kills without remorse. Stewie shoots Bertram in the head with an arrow and makes a pun. He watches Dr. Pritchfield die and comments on his bad day. He lacks basic empathy. His kills are casual, creative, and cruel. Stewie Griffin represents the show's darkest psychological portrait. He's a baby genius who builds death rays because he's lonely. He plots matricide because he craves attention. He constructs elaborate personas because he fears being ordinary. In a show full of crazy characters, Stewie is the only one who's genuinely, clinically insane. He exhibits psychopathic traits, identity disorders, attachment issues, and homicidal ideation. The fact that he's 1 year old makes it simultaneously horrifying and absurd. Stewie is Family Guy's most complex character precisely because his crazy isn't one-dimensional. He's lonely and cruel, brilliant and childish, murderous and vulnerable. He's proof that intelligence without emotional development creates monsters. His genius can't compensate for his arrested development. His weapons can't protect him from his own isolation. The tragedy of Stewie is that he recognizes his problems but can't fix them. He knows his persona is fake. He understands his loneliness. He sees how he pushes people away, but he can't stop. His need to be special overrides his need for connection. His fear of ordinariness is stronger than his fear of loneliness. Stewie Griffin, the baby who proves that genius and insanity are separated by the thinnest possible line, and sometimes they're the exact same thing. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.